I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Town Council, Committee of the Whole, and roll call. All members are present except Councilor Knoll and Councilor Perizzotti. Councilor Grimm is here, he's just taking care of some business. Calendar and communications. Anybody have any calendar communications? Great. Approval of the minutes.
Wow. Mr. Mayor, I will move approval of all of these minutes listed in our agenda. There's a whole bunch of them.
Great.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilor Watson, a second by Councilor De La Cruz to move the minutes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 6-0. We have a lot of people filing in right now. I know there's a lot of people who are outside, and it is, just to let people know, it's a pretty big agenda, a lot of things going on, so it could go on for quite some time. I'm going to try to keep to the order that we have it in listed on the agenda. So the first order of business is the Ledge-Lite Health District Community Health Assessment. Good evening.
Good evening. We're on. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Steve Mansfield. I'm Director of Health for Ledge-Lite Health District. And tonight, I'm joined by my colleague, Russ Melmet. He's our epidemiologist and the supervisor of our health education and promotion program. I gave all of the counselors one pager here. If you take a look, it's titled Basic Health Programs. And it's just a brief reminder of some of the things that guide the work that Ledge-Lite Health District and every health department and district in the state of Connecticut are required to do. You may be very familiar with some of these items. For instance, number 6, enforcing laws and regulations that protect health and ensure safety. That's as simple as inspecting restaurants, subsurface sewage disposal systems, wells, and so forth. And that's what a lot of people think of the health department when they think of health departments. What we're going to talk about tonight is something that goes much deeper into the public health realm than I think a lot of people are used to. If you look at this basic health program sheet, items 4 and 5 talk about mobilizing community partnerships, calls to action, developing policies and plans that support individual and community health efforts. What Russ is going to talk to you all about tonight is two things, our well-being survey and some of the data that came out of that well-being survey and how that information will feed into our community health assessment, eventually working toward our strategic plan at Ledge-Lite Health District. So I know you do have a full agenda. I'll turn it right over to Russ. And,
thank you.
Please feel free to jump in with any questions as you have them.
Thanks, Steve. I'll try to keep my remarks to under an hour. So I just want to highlight that this community health assessment has been a partnership with Lawrence Memorial Hospital, and it's been a true partnership in every sense. We both contributed human resources, financing, facilities, time, effort. It's been a wonderful partnership, so I think we're very lucky to have that hospital so close to this community. The goal of the assessment is really just to answer some questions. I fear that it's going to end up creating more questions than it answers, but really the goal is to answer some questions like, are there health or well-being or social issues in the town? How do they compare to benchmarks, to the state, to the county, to the United States? Are those differences important? Sometimes you see big differences, but are they really important? Sometimes you don't see any differences, but they are important. And what are those things associated with? What are these health issues, these well-being issues associated with? Are they associated closely with different geographies or education, income, age, or gender? These things that we love to talk about in public health all the time. Our health assessment is going to cover all these different topics, social determinants, infectious disease, the whole list. I'm going to touch on a few of these things tonight, not all of them, because we really would be here for a long time. And the geographies some you're going to hear about tonight, and what the report will focus on ultimately is the Connecticut state as a whole, New London County, what we're calling Greater New London, which is really just the L&M Hospital service area, which runs from the Limes to the Stoningtons and including Montville and Ledyard. Ledgelight Health District area and towns, individual towns, zip codes, and sometimes even census tracts. Sometimes the data we look at comes down to a very small geography. These are all the data sources we pulled from and more. These were the major ones. I'll focus mostly tonight on our 2015 well-being survey, and that was done in partnership with Data Haven and Siena College. And we did get a representative sample of residents of Groton in addition to other towns in Ledgelight Health District and the L&M service area as a whole. And that survey touched on a lot of different subjects: civic involvement, classic health outcomes, chronic disease, transportation, housing, economic security, lots of different things, and I'll touch on a lot of those tonight. So I just kind of want to get into some data, because as an epidemiologist, it's just what I love to talk about. So in the survey, generally, we were interested in how people characterize their overall health. How do people feel about their overall health? This is the percentage of people who said their overall health was very good or excellent. What you'll see in all these slides, the orange bar is either Groton in most cases, or sometimes it's Ledgelight Health District, and the green bar is Connecticut. So Groton compares favorably to the state, slightly better. Then those next three are very good or excellent health by education, increasing levels of education, and the far right is by income, less than $75,000 a year, more than 75. You can see that people feel better about their health as education increases. This is something we see all the time. Education is more strongly associated with every health outcome than perhaps anything else except smoking. And even that's associated with education. So really, education is very closely linked with health. And so is income. So if you earn less or you're less well educated, you're less healthy. And this is all Groton data. As a place to live, do people think their town is getting better? This is Groton. So about one quarter of everybody in Groton said that their town was getting better. It compares reasonably well to the state slightly better, but I wouldn't call that an important difference. But if you look at the difference by age, so if you're younger, you felt better about the town's future, that it's getting much better. And if you were 50 plus, you were less likely to say that you felt the town was getting much better. I find that kind of interesting. I'm not sure what's going on there, but you see some of these things vary by age and income. Sometimes they make sense, and sometimes I can't put my head around it.
How old are you?
40. So I'm sort of going to be straddling that line not too long from now. So it makes sense to you, is that what you're saying?
Makes sense.
Makes sense. Okay, so you don't think the town is getting that much better, but if you were much younger,
No, I know the difference. I can understand the difference between the age groups.
yeah, okay. Well, you should come to our improvement planning then, because we need some insight.
I'll feel better.
Dean's only 29.
Oh, okay, forget it. We got plenty of time. So we asked people if they had good access to recreational facilities in their neighborhood. So this is a little bit busy. Connecticut's on the left. 71% of people in Connecticut said that they did feel like they had good access to recreation facilities. I highlighted Groton in the orange because it stood out across all the towns that we looked at in Ledgelight Health District. Better than the state, better than the county, better than the greater New London area. Best overall, 83%. So good job with bringing access to recreational facilities to your residents. And they also feel pretty good about the condition of those facilities. So we asked people if they feel like the condition of those facilities is good or excellent. Groton again stands out, 81% said they thought the conditions of parks and recreational facilities was good or excellent. It does vary by income though, so if you were less well educated, you didn't feel as great about the parks in your area. Here's one. So this you can think of as a referendum on the job you're doing, right? Government responsiveness to the needs of residents, characterized as good or excellent. So Groton in the orange, 44% compares favorably to the state. It does vary by education. So people with the highest level of education felt like government was more responsive to their needs. So this does make sense to me, right? It shouldn't actually be that way, right? So government should be responsive to everybody, and it probably is. But this is a perception issue, right? People perceive the government is more responsive if they're more well educated. Maybe they know about the political process better, they're more involved, I'm not sure. People in Groton feel that the job done by police to keep residents safe is great, right? 84%, way better than the state as a whole. Moving to employment, what I'll call real unemployment. So this is people who say they were unemployed but desire work. They're actually looking for jobs. Groton, 7% compared to the state at 5%, but people with a high school degree or less, 16%. unemployment in the town of Groton. And what I think is a little bit more troubling is that of those people who said they were out of work but looking for work, 46% in the town of Groton were long-term unemployed. They've been unemployed for 2 or more years. And we hear about this nationally. I mean, this is kind of a problem since the Great Recession, right? Long-term unemployment. So it's a problem here as well. Food insecurity in the town of Groton. Compares favorably to the state. About 12% of people said that in the last 12 months they couldn't afford to buy food for their family. Same as the state. When you look at it by education, more than 1 in 4 residents of Groton with a high school degree or less were food insecure at some time in the last 12 months. And of those folks, 33% said that that happened every month. So every month they couldn't afford to buy food for their families. I put the next slide up, which is people who are overweight or obese in the town of Groton by all these different categories. This is not meant to confuse you or anything like that. It just essentially doesn't matter if you're male or female, young or old, college educated, rich or not. There's a problem with being overweight and obese in the town of Groton, just like there's everywhere else. What I find really interesting and why I put these two things, food insecurity and obesity, next to each other is we seem to have these unnatural and inexplicable co-epidemics, I'll call them, of food insecurity and obesity, right? So that red bar is people who are high school educated or less, 72% overweight or obese. But they're also the people who are most likely to report being food insecure. So this is something about the food system, not just in Groton, but everywhere, where we have a problem with obesity, but also a problem with people being able to afford food. Some classic health outcomes here. High blood pressure in Groton, about 30% of residents said they were diagnosed with high blood pressure, comparable to the state. Also decreases with increasing education. So the more well-educated you are, the less likely you are to be hypertensive. Diabetes and blood sugar. So Groton compares favorably to the state. Those first bars, orange bar and the green bar, the graph on the right, 6% of residents in Groton are diagnosed with diabetes. But when it comes to monitoring diabetes with the hemoglobin A1C test, which is a measure of long-term blood sugar stability, fully 1/4 of Groton residents diagnosed with diabetes have not had one of these tests done in the last 12 months, which is a problem. So this is something that we can work on. So what happens when you have diabetes and sometimes diabetes out of control? Graph on the left, eventually you die of cardiovascular disease. Diabetes and cardiovascular disease are closely linked. So what we see here, the 2 orange bars are Connecticut from 2 5-year periods, 2001 and 2005, 2006 to 2010, and then Ledge Light Health District, same periods. So we do see decreasing cardiovascular disease mortality. But we are doing slightly worse in this area than compared to the state as a whole. So the #1 killer in the country is cardiovascular disease, right? Secondary to cancer. And then, but, you know, we're doing slightly better, but we could do even better. The graph on the right, people who said they had a heart attack or heart disease in Groton, 8% in Groton compared to 5% in the state of Connecticut. Again, if you are less well educated, you are far more likely to report having had a heart attack or heart disease.
Excuse me, Russ?
Yeah.
How big was the survey? Like, how many people were?
So the survey in the entire state was about 16,000 people. In Ledge Light Health District, we surveyed 1,000 people, and in Groton, we surveyed 250 residents. So when you have rare outcomes, things where people say only 1 or 2% or 3% said they had this condition, those numbers tend to vary quite a bit when you have small sample size. But 250 is actually a pretty considerable sample size for a survey. It is representative, and I can show you that if you want.
Yeah. No, I believe you. I think, 250 to 40,000, it sounds like that wouldn't be, it would be less than 1%, right?
It's, yeah, about 1/2 of 1%, something like that. So I should say that the survey is weighted. So what we did was we looked at the demographics of the respondents and adjusted the responses, or the response rates essentially, to weight them so that they were more closely resembled the demographics of the town. So if there were slightly more older people than actually made up in the town, those responses were weighted less heavily.
And was it done by phone or by written or
Yes, by phone, so about 70% landline, 30% cell phone, nights and evenings and weekends as well. So we asked people if they have access to a car when they need it. 90% of Groton residents said they did. That's great, right? It's actually better than the state at 85. does vary by education. If you're less well educated, you're less likely to say you got a car when you need it. Well, why is that important? So we also asked people if they ever had to stay home because they couldn't get somewhere. They had to go somewhere and they couldn't get somewhere. If you were less well educated, roughly 1 in 5 of those people said that at some point in the last 12 months they had to get somewhere and they couldn't. So why is that important, right? So we asked people if there was ever a time where they delayed or didn't get the medical care they needed at any time in the past 12 months. If you were less well educated, you were twice as likely to report not getting the medical care you needed in the last 12 months. Some of that has to do with access, right? You don't have access to transportation, you can't get to the doctor's appointment in time, you can't make last-minute appointments. Now, can we do anything about cars for people? Probably not, but there are some things that we can talk about with transportation infrastructure that can alleviate some of this. Getting back to some more classic health, smoking prevalence in the town of Groton. 24% of Groton residents said they smoke compared to 15% for the state. More males than females, more younger people than older people, and more less well-educated than well-educated. So if you're male, young, and have a high school degree or less, you're far more likely to smoke. And we all know the kinds of health outcomes that occur as a result of smoking. Single largest preventable cause of death in this country, smoking. Tick-borne diseases. So we mapped tick-borne diseases in all of Ledge Light Health District. The darker the red or orange in these census tracts, the more likely, or the higher the rate of tick-borne disease. Not just Lyme disease, but babesiosis and ehrlichiosis. Groton compares favorably to some of the other census tracts in Ledge Light Health District. You can see Waterford in particular has a couple hot spots here that we need to address. And this is not atypical. So when you have an urban center, an urban core, for example, is in the city of Groton, you're less likely to have lots of deer, less likely to have lots of ticks and tick habitat, you're less likely to get tick-borne diseases. It doesn't mean that people here in Groton don't get tick-borne diseases. Compared to the rest of the country, we in Connecticut are not in good shape with tick-borne diseases. This is really just comparing all the census tracts in Ledge Light Health District to try to find the hot spots, and the hottest spots are in East Lyme and Waterford. We have some of the worst asthma rates in the country here in Connecticut, so we looked at asthma in Groton. So we have less of a problem with asthma in Groton than the rest of the state. 9% of residents, adult residents, said they had asthma compared to 13% for the state. But when we asked people how well controlled their asthma was, in other words, did they have no asthma attacks in the last 30 days? Of people who said they had asthma, well-controlled asthma was less common in Groton than the rest of the state. 54% of residents in Groton who have asthma reported never having an asthma attack. So about 50% said they did. So asthma is really controlled, right? There's probably people sitting up there that have asthma. You take an inhaled steroid, you can control your asthma symptoms usually very well. This is something we can address. And here's a statewide map of when you don't have well-controlled asthma, you end up in the emergency room and being hospitalized for asthma outcomes. So you can see Groton, sort of the little area over there, right? Groton and New London. Some of the highest rates in southeast Connecticut and around New Haven and Hartford of hospitalizations for asthma. That should almost never happen. Right? Asthma should be well controlled at home. You should never have to be hospitalized for asthma. Graph on the left and the graph on the right. Graph on the left is ED non-admissions for opioid abuse and dependence. Graph on the right is inpatient discharges. So you showed up in the ED, you ended up on the graph on the left. You end up hospitalized, you're in the graph on the right. From 2009 2014, both ED admissions and hospitalization discharges more than doubled in our district in 5 years. More than doubled. This is a nationwide problem, but we know we have this problem in southeastern Connecticut. And it's not getting better, it's getting worse. So according to CIRAC, which is the Southeast Regional Action Council, there is some good news when it comes to substance abuse in our youth, anyway. Lifetime and recent use of drugs is on par or lower than the rest of the country. Use of alcohol and tobacco is decreased, and the perception of harm for both of those substances is increased. So when kids think things are harmful, they're less likely to do them. When they think alcohol and cigarettes are harmful, they don't smoke or drink. So those things are coming down because perception of harm is going up. The bad news, 13% of youth report using a prescription medication to get high. That's a little scary. And the perception of harm of marijuana has decreased. So kids are thinking that pot is not harmful anymore. I'll give you 2 reasons. All the conversation about pot as medicine and the conversation about legalizing pot. That information is out there, and it's out there in droves, and so kids think it's not harmful. But I will say we can look to tobacco as getting towards a victory. Kids now think that tobacco is harmful. Kids don't smoke anymore. And I've seen the data. So if we can get kids to understand that pot is harmful, they won't use it. Usually we like to see mortality statistics for all causes going down. So here you've got Connecticut on the left, Legislative Health District on the right, the 2 time periods. This is accidental poisonings, which includes drug and alcohol overdoses. Mortality from these things are going up, not down. So for most causes of death, we see mortality coming down. For accidental poisonings, which includes drugs, they're going up. Infant mortality in Legislative Health District versus Connecticut. So this is infant mortality is like that statistic that governments love to point to say we're a really healthy country. And I don't know if you know this, but in this country, infant mortality is kind of a national embarrassment. Right? It's not very good, despite all we spend on medical care. In Legislative Health District, Connecticut infant mortality is coming down steadily from 2008 to 2013. In Legislative Health Districts, it's more variable. And from 2012 to 2013, we saw a huge jump. So what that means relative to Connecticut, 4.7 deaths per 1,000 live births compared to 7.2 in Legislative Health District. That puts Legislative Health District on par with Lebanon, Malaysia, Kuwait, and Chile for infant mortality. I don't want to make any blanket statements about those countries. I'm just using them as a reference. So that's it for the data I'm going to touch on tonight. We've got a lot of other information that I'd love to share with you. I just didn't want to be here for 2 hours, and I'm sure you don't want to listen to me speak for 2 hours. We did some focus groups, and we had some key informant interviews. We also had a big partner forum where we invited representatives from social service agencies, municipal, other municipal departments. We had John Reiner there to talk about what the problems are in the community that we can try to solve. We've got next steps. We're going to release our full report for the entire jurisdiction, and we will also release individual town profiles, one for Groton, New London, Ledyard, East Lyme, and Waterford. We're having a prioritization event, so we've collected all this data. We want to talk about what can we realistically work on as a community. That event's happening on May 18th between 10:30 and 1:30 at Philomena's Restaurant in Waterford. Would love to have town council representation there. Would love it. So if any of you can make it, just email me. I'll leave you my card. After we prioritize what it is that we want to work on, what it is that is feasible to work on, we're going to come up with an improvement plan for the community's health. And once we do that, we're going to have to talk about an agency strategic plan. So what does Legislative Health District, how do we need to adjust to meet the needs of the community? From a workforce development perspective, structural issues within our agency, what do we need to do to respond better? So those are our next steps. And I'll invite any questions. I know you've got a full agenda, but I'll invite any questions or discussion.
Russ, thank you. Councilors, do you guys have any questions? Councilor Cruz?
I just want to thank you for the great work. I see you at all these events that I've been going to, and you show up and you speak out for Groton. I do want to ask, because it is Legislative District, and we've been going to all these roundtable discussions with senators and mayors, but nobody has been able to say yet that we can call Percocet heroin 1 and then turn OxyContin into heroin 2, because it is what it is. We know that. It's 20 years in the making. Could Ledge Light impose that on the pharmacies that are in our districts? So it seems like it can't be done politically. It's impossible. It's something that can't happen. We've been screaming it from the rooftop, but every person that we meet and deal with addiction had no idea that OxyContin or Percocet was heroin. They had absolutely no clue, and I think that's a disservice to the public. And we have parents that call me screaming and yelling, when is that going to change? When's that going to happen? So there's an undercurrent, but is that something we can direct through you? Because to me, what change can we make? That would be the #1 change that would help our community, letting people know exactly what that drug is. And I think, for whatever reason, politically it can't be done, but maybe it can be done on an enforcement side, if that's a possibility.
I'm speaking generally here. I think something of that magnitude generally starts much higher up in the local level. There are a lot of small health departments in the state of Connecticut, and I don't know, that's the honest answer. I know we have the ability to promulgate regulations, but specifically drug-related regulations, I don't think it's something that can be done at the local level. Generally, those things are done at the state level.
I think the best things come from the local level sometimes, and it doesn't seem like it get done in Congress. I mean, they're fighting for that in Washington. I think if one small district stepped up and started the conversation, maybe by stating that, or at least letting us put warnings inside those drugs. I mean, the more people we meet, and we meet people every day, 5 last weekend for our group, 5. New calls, new people that live in Groton, and each one of them did not know. When I told the parents that it was the same exact thing, they had no clue and no idea. I think that should be the warning, that it's heroin. And I think we could do that, and maybe, and I don't know how to do it. I was trying to do it through the council, or trying to do it through, even at the state level, but it doesn't seem like it can get done possibly. It seems like it's too big of a mountain to change the name or something. But if you can do it, just food for thought. Immediate help right away, solve a lot of issues.
Just not speaking from a regulatory perspective, but the coalitions that are working to prevent substance abuse in Groton and in a few other towns are attempting to work with some of the pharmacies to put extra information into the packages with those drugs when those prescriptions are filled. That works better with individually operated pharmacies than it does with the big chains. The answer we tend to get is we'd love to do that, but it needs to go through corporate.
Yeah.
But we are making efforts to at least try to get the word out in some way, in some systematic way, that those drugs are dangerous, more dangerous than what you might read on the package that says it may cause drowsiness. You know?
But whatever corporate decision it is, it's still selling in our district, in our town. So we should have a say in what it says, and in the honesty and integrity of the labeling, because it's false. And I think people are being wooed to sleep thinking that it's, like, again, I thought it was no big deal before I got involved 3 years ago, and now I know that it's the #1 problem in our country. So it'd be nice, and no one else has been able to answer. I'm not putting you on the grill, because we've asked senators and congressmen, and we've been talking to a lot of people, and absolutely nobody has the gall to do it, I guess. I guess that's what we'd say.
I couldn't agree with you more, and my advice is to not stop asking.
Thank you for thank you for everything you have done, because you guys really have pushed the issue. I really appreciate it.
Anybody else? Thank you, gentlemen.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for your time, and I encourage you to go to our website and look at Ledge Light Health District and all of the other things that we do on the list that I gave you. This is one small part of one category on the list, so, and feel free to give us a call anytime. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Next on the agenda is a tax incentive agreement for Brantford Manor, and I believe Related Affordable is here. And we want to invite the city, representatives from the city who are here. They'd like to come up to the table as well.
And I believe there are a few folks in the Housing Authority.
Okay.
Also.
Is there people from the Housing Authority as well? Mark, I think everybody from the city is out. Yes, Housing Authority, please come up. Yep.
You know what?
Can I have one of those back?
You may.
Diane. Hair looks good. Diane. Mayor, at 7:30, I just gotta run down the street and vote for my fire budget, and I'll be right back. I don't know, I guess we're gonna be here. I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah, we're going to.
I'll get you a coffee.
Welcome, Mayor and City Councilors.
Thank you, Mayor.
So I'll hand it over to you gentlemen, if you'd like.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jeff Godley, local counsel for Related Affordable. With me here tonight is Matt Finkel, president of Related, and David Pearson and Ted Lubitz. Tonight we'd like to give you an overview of the project and then to give you an opportunity to ask any questions regarding the project, and also some advice or information regarding the statutory authority for the agreement that we're seeking. Matt.
Great. Thank you again. I'm happy to be here. Again, my name is Matt Finkel. I am the president of Related Affordable, which is the the company that's under contract currently to purchase Brantford Manor. A little bit about who we are and why we think we're a good purchaser for the property. Related Affordable is a company that focuses entirely on the acquisition, rehabilitation, and preservation of properties like Brantford Manor, which is a project-based Section 8 asset. Over the past almost 42 years, we've compiled a portfolio that now exceeds about 32,000 units of similar real estate across the country, with concentrations in the Northeast, the Southeast, the Midwest, and the West Coast. We also have our own captive management company, which would be brought in to run the property hand in hand with us. At the same time, we're planning to undertake a robust rehabilitation and preservation of the property that my colleagues Dave and Ted will describe in more detail. But suffice it to say, it involves a dramatic change in what the property looks like from today, and also things that we can provide to the residents that will help their lives as well. So we're really excited about moving forward with the purchase. We've been under contract for about 45 days now and are expecting to close in the next few months. And with that, Dave Pearson, Senior Vice President, can talk a little bit more about the deal itself and what we plan to do with the property.
Good evening. Appreciate everybody coming together this evening to discuss, I think, a very important project. I think most folks here are familiar with Brantford Manor, but it is 442 units on a very large site. It's 47 existing townhome buildings spread over 37 acres. So it takes a large footprint of the city and the town, and we think is a nice property, but really in need of a substantial renovation, which we're planning to undertake, and also the affordability that protects the existing residents is set to expire at the end of this year. So, as Matt said, the property was publicly marketed, and we came to the table with a very strong proposal that contemplated undertaking a preservation of the affordability of the project. And this is what our mission is as owners, and we seek to be long-term owners and be part of the community and really not only improve the lives of the existing residents and future residents for the property, but also, work with the local stakeholders to make sure that we're helping to integrate the property into the surrounding community as best as possible. So I want to take just a few minutes, if you have the handout in front of you. The first couple pages sort of talk about Related Affordable, as Matt just described, and then a little bit about the property, a handful of photos of what the existing property looks like, and you can see that it could use a little bit of work. And so what we're contemplating is a renovation exceeding $18.5 million, which is on a per unit basis over $42,000 per unit. And it's really pretty robust. Though we don't go in and knock the buildings down or take them down to the studs, we really, from an interior unit perspective, really improve the units with all new kitchens and bathrooms and lighting, upgrade the floors, and implement a lot of energy efficiency upgrades throughout, not only including the windows, insulation, all of the appliances, all of the water features will be low flow and energy efficient. So that's always a big part of what Related does as part of renovations, and so that'll be a big component here. In addition to what we're planning to do on the unit interiors, I think one of the most significant aspects will be what we're planning to do aesthetically to the property. So we really are going to undertake a large improvement to the curb appeal with all new siding, bringing in some architectural features so that the buildings look a little bit nicer in the community, and also will be able to weather, long-term and continue to look nice for years to come. There'll be significant landscaping improvements, a lot of work that is designed to make sure that the property has a long, useful life. So we'll be going in and replacing all the major building systems, including the roofs and the mechanical systems, the windows, as I mentioned. Also, really focusing on things to make sure that it's a safe and secure place for the residents to live. So new lighting, upgrading the technology with the security monitoring system so that we can make sure that we deter and also capture anything that potentially occurs there. And one I think the things that we're most excited about is trying to bring a new resident services building onto the property. So we've identified a space within the property where we could construct a new facility that will be available for the use of the residents. I think most notably for the children to have some after-school programming and activities. Also bringing in a fitness center so that we can improve the health of the residents, and a new management office. So it's a very robust scope. It really touches on all aspects of the property, and like I said, it's a pretty large number of almost $42,000 per unit. So I'll sort of talk a little bit about what it takes to get there. As Matt said, we've been under contract for about 45 days, working on developing the plan. And our financing structure involves getting an allocation of tax-exempt bonds, which we've been in discussions with the Town of Groton Housing Authority for a conduit issuance of bonds, where they request an allocation of bonds through the state volume cap. We bring to the table a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac lending partner who will ultimately finance those bonds. And they're the ones taking all of the real estate risk, all of the credit risk associated with those tax-exempt bonds. The Housing Authority would be strictly a conduit issuer and would have no liability. And when we are able to get those tax-exempt bonds, we're also able to work with Connecticut Housing in order to get an allocation of tax credits. And so we're able to raise over $25 million in tax credit equity, working in this public-private partnership with the state agency and a private investment to buy the tax credits. And we're able to use those resources and able to undertake this renovation that we've discussed. So that's one of the key components, is the issuance of the bonds. The other really critical component is one of the things that we're here to talk about today, which is being able to have some certainty around the real estate taxes. So what we are proposing is a tax stabilization plan where we look at the current taxes that are being paid to the town and to the city, and set that as a fixed amount, and set forth through a tax incentive agreement a schedule of the real estate taxes to be paid to each party over the next 30 years, so that both the town and the city have a certainty of the amount of real estate taxes that they'll be collecting from the property, and also we'll be able to have some certainty in our underwriting with our lending partner so that they'll be able to generate the appropriate loan proceeds to allow us to undertake this, this plan that we've set forth. So it's a really critical component. Our goal is to not come to you today and ask for any sort of decrease in the real estate taxes. We've structured it so that we can continue to pay what the property has been paying and set forth some increases over time so that we can really structure this property to continue to really benefit these residents for the long term. We've sort of set forth some representative pictures of a community room we recently built on a similar sized Section 8 property down in Pennsauken, New Jersey, which you would see on page 5 if you flip to it. And this is similar to what we're envisioning. It'll obviously fit in with the, be designed to fit in with the property, but these are the type of improvements we try to bring to the table when we undertake these renovations. And then the one below is was a tough little property in Newark, New Jersey, where we were able, through some siding and some architectural design, to really change, what the property looked like from the curb. And I think driving through Branford Manor, as we did on our way over here this evening, there's a tremendous opportunity with the property to really improve how it looks from the curb and really bring some really bring some great improvements there. So I will sort of pause there. Throughout the rest of the package that we've presented, it sets forth a little bit more details about the tax stabilization plan, as I mentioned, including the schedule that we are proposing for the taxes over the next 30 years. It talks about the statutory authority under which the town would be able to enter into this tax incentive agreement. The property is in an enterprise zone, and so we'd be seeking under the general statute 32-71E for the Enterprise Zone Act, which we think gives the town the ability to enter into this agreement. So that's, I think that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. That was nice and brief. Open it up to the councilors for discussion. Councilor De La Cruz?
Yeah, a couple questions. I see, when you did the renovations, I know currently they don't have laundry facilities inside. Is that something that you bring to is that something that would happen?
Yeah, go ahead.
There will be a laundry facility within the property, but not within the units.
Not in each individual unit?
Not in individual units. The part of the plan with the new building is to implement a laundry facility.
So it'd be like a coin-operated type thing in the meeting building. Is there a reason why I know a lot of public housing doesn't, but it is a pretty huge financial burden for someone who doesn't have a car, or, that they're getting laundry, or maybe they're carrying it to the place, but it just seems like it would make sense and it would be a cost savings for the people, but maybe it's something to it.
Yeah, it can be a engineering challenge sometimes if the piping is not set up to handle that kind of volume. Because if you can imagine suddenly having 442 washing machines in that sort of location, it can overwhelm sometimes the piping system or even the sewer system near there. So we can certainly analyze it, but invariably that becomes an issue. So we try to provide something that's reasonably accessible to the residents at a discounted cost or fair cost.
I grew up in a place like that. It's a pain to get
Sure.
it is not easy. What was my other question now? Oh, now, how do you go about the renovations right away? Do people, you have empty, and then you'll renovate that, and then move people around and kind of shuffle them a bit?
It's actually, it's pretty exciting. Maybe not if you're a resident there, it can seem a little overwhelming, but we do it with all the residents in place, actually. Unless we come up with against some environmental issues, which is pretty uncommon. So the way that an apartment is renovated is that we try to enter an apartment, say 3 or maybe 4 times to do different aspects during the day. And during that period, hopefully the resident is either at work, or if they're not at work, we provide a location on site for the resident to stay during the day, and that would be either a couple vacant units that we would set up as a lounge, where they could, have their lunch, watch TV, read a book, do whatever. But at the end of any given day, the unit is habitable and they can return. So if they're in the middle of the period where their unit's being renovated, when they go home one night, they may not have cabinets for that night, but all of their things will be provided for in bins that our team would help them put in for that one night. So is it an inconvenience? It is, and we communicate that very clearly with the residents. But our management company and our construction people are highly skilled at making sure that this dance that sort of happens throughout the property is well communicated and well executed.
You have a website set up where you maybe, I know there's gonna be bad reviews, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that said it went well, but there's always the people that say it was the worst experience.
It is, and I'm always very upfront about it. We have a big resident meeting before we start the renovation, and we show them pictures of what it's going to look like, and then we do a sample unit, and we encourage people to walk into that unit, and then we say, that's all the good stuff. Now, here comes all the bad stuff. It's gonna be dusty. People are gonna be traipsing through, but just bear with us, work with us. We're gonna provide alternative places for you to spend time. We will do whatever we can to minimize the impact on you and your family. But when it's all over and we have the big ribbon cutting and we have the big party, you're gonna love how the place looks. But yeah, I'm not, you're absolutely right. Some people say it was a tough experience.
Do they actually have the ability to say no, say if somebody was not feeling well, or is there a clause where they just say, I can't do it? Or?
Absolutely, absolutely. What we do is we lay out a schedule, we communicate with the residents, we give them as short of a window as possible when we plan to go into their unit, but if that morning someone gets up and they've got a stomach ache or they're home with a child, we will not force our way in, of course not. We would reschedule that to a later time. And a project of this size, which the renovations would probably take 9 to 12 months. It's all about sequencing and dealing with issues like that, because of course they come up every day.
And my last one,
Sure.
down there at the back, there's actually water access to this property. I always thought they could have like a place to put kayaks and stuff.
Huh,
Is
that's
that-
interesting.
I mean, I don't even know if they own, if that's even part of that property, but it just seems like, I know that's part of a park. I don't know if it goes all the way behind, but if there was a trail or something, I just think it'd be something neat.
That's certainly worth looking into. We haven't thought about that, but it's an interesting idea. It could be another amenity.
That's it for me.
Councilor Deepes?
The question that naturally arises, other than Councilor Dahlgren's, is if one were to map out the proposed payments, we know what those are there in the schedule. It's essentially based on what, it's a little over, it's rounding up what the town, the taxes you'd pay to the town, the taxes paid to the city. So again, rounding up $230,000 to the town, that's the latest figure. It's a little less than that. Same thing with the city, it's $65,000. I think the city's figure is a little less than that. And so you're proposing to have that frozen for 10 years, and then thereafter, each figure goes up by 3% annually out to 30 years. It's a long way to go. And that's fixed. What I don't know is what kind of a deal that represents. Obviously, what we're being asked to do is to sacrifice something. Usually when we have something like this, we're being asked to sacrifice something in the short term for a long-term gain. The improvement in a property is supposed to translate into greater value, better for the developer, better for us. We can tax it at a higher rate, we grow the grand list, et cetera. I don't know that I've ever seen, Harry, you've been here the longest. I don't know that I've ever seen something that goes out to 30 years. And I'm thinking, in 30 years, your successors will come and say, we need a break, because these things are 30 years old, and we need to do this all over again. When will we ever, I mean, I don't know to what degree the property will actually improve in value. I do not doubt that work needs to be done, capital needs to be invested, and this is the way to do it. I mean, for example, I wouldn't have any way of renovating any of these things. This is the stuff that you folks do, so God bless. But are we expected, is part of the pitch, so to speak, that we will not only have an improvement, but that this will maintain or maybe increase in value over time? We'll have the Jewel Plus. Is that part of the story here? Or is this just, this has got to be renovated? We're not looking at an increase in value. We're looking at maintaining the value of what's there with an infusion of this capital.
Complicated question.
Yeah.
I would think that long-term value in real estate is really determined by a lot of different things, right? It's determined by economic conditions, it's determined by socioeconomic conditions, it's determined by what the Federal Reserve chooses to do on any given quarterly meeting. However, I would say that as a long-term owner of property, and we have properties in our portfolio that we've owned since 1972. I wasn't with the company then. I was alive then, but I wasn't with the company then. But our founder still, who founded this company that we're a part of, and is involved in many different things, is a long-term owner of affordable housing. And those of us who succeed in this business, we succeed because we take care of our properties and that we build long-term value, and we don't add too much leverage, and we don't make stupid decisions with how we invest our capital into the property. So our goal is, yes, to have a property in 10, 15, 30 years that is valuable. But whether or not that comes to fruition, we'll do everything we can, but it's hard to say what the exogenous factors around us will do relative to the economy and interest rates and other things.
The only way that I could compare, and again, your numbers are solid, so I had to sort of make up scenarios, and these are overly simplistic and do not take into account necessarily what's going to happen, which is that the dollar will change in value, usually historically. The dollar becomes worth less over time. Same thing with the mark and everything. But I've got three scenarios that presume an average increase in taxes, assuming the property stays at the same value, holds its value for 30 years. A scenario, of 2.5% on average, increase in taxes every year, so assuming the same value of the property. One at 4%, one at the Armageddon of 7% every year for 30 years.
That sounds like Chicago, by the way.
Yeah. We're doing our best here. I can't promise for 30 years, though. But under scenario one, where you have an average of 2.5%, and again, there's no time value ascribed. I didn't have the time or the wit, to be honest, to tackle this without pulling my hair out, what's left of it. But if I measure your scale versus that scale, we would have collected, the town, for example, would have collected $10 million, whereas under yours it would be 8.6. So we would be giving up, so to speak, and again, without any adjustments over time, $1.4 million. Between the town and the city, it would be more like $1.8 million under that scenario. Now, I recognize it's not 1.8 present dollars. I'm comparing today's apples with apples from 30 years. No pun intended. That's the kind of thing that I'm trying to put this into some sort of a framework so that I can understand what concession are we making, what concession are you making.
Right.
You're offering predictability. We're getting predictability. But are we giving up anything? Are we getting anything? I gotta look at it that way. So, I'm sure I missed something, but.
No, I think the other component of this is the preservation of affordable housing, right? So if this was market rate housing, then there's oftentimes, of course, depending on how the market is, different value growth. What we're proposing here and seeking is in connection with preserving this as affordable housing. So, you may be giving up some long-term value growth of the property because you're helping to keep it for the residents that need it. So I think there is that a little bit of a trade-off, but I do agree that there are other schedules, and I do apologize. The total figures here at the bottom are a 20-year total as opposed to a 10-year total, or 30-year total. So your number of 8.6 is correct. The 5 billion here is not. So I think there is certainly that trade-off. There's other schedules that could be run. I think that it has to be something that we're able to leverage, be able to pull the financing resources together to have some predictability. And I think a 7% per year increases far outpaces where any revenue growth on an annual basis would exceed. So I think that over time, it could affect the property's viability. So I think, that's the balancing act.
The one thing I will say too is this eliminates any downside. If you see the historical taxes, we have a 3-year number in there, but it went up and down. So you're protected on the downside, whereas we will be making that payment regardless of what happens to the values.
Right, and that gets me to my next question. I had to read it a couple of times, and now that I read it again, after passing along a dark rumor, which I shouldn't have, the schedule is what you would pay regardless of what in other words, if we said, in year 13, hey, the taxes are $249,000 for the town, but the schedule comes to $251,327. The $251 is what you pay. It's not a cap, it's what you pay.
Correct.
Your statement at the end of the paragraphs 1 and 2 just reinforces the notion you are not to pay any more than what it says in the schedule. That's it. So it's not a cap of any sort.
No.
Okay, so you will pay what's in the schedule. And the last question that I have, I'm sorry to belabor this. The transfer of any interest, this agreement, there's a provision in 16 that says that this is not transferable. If you were to sell the property, you can't transfer this goodie with it. Whoever buys it from you doesn't get it, but an affiliate does. An affiliate does. An affiliate of the developer, controlled by or under common control with the developer, and of course, we have to give our consent, but our consent may not be reasonably withheld. Our reasonable, request can't be withheld, et cetera, all the boilerplate. There's that provision, and also the provision of dealing with a lender. Lender having security interest does have your right to substitute a successor owner. When a lot of people think lender, they think bank. It could be your own, sort of your right hand and your left hand kind of thing. I don't have a particular concern about that, but if anybody, just so that it's out there.
Sure.
It is possible under certain circumstances for you, in fact, to transfer this to another entity and call it an affiliate, or say it's our lender, it's our capital company, and effect a transfer that way. But I mean, if we were to agree to this, what do we care whether it's you or your successor? As long as the job gets done, we made a promise. I don't think we're looking for a, you sell it in, aha, we get to break the schedule kind of thing. If we're in, we're in. If we're not, we're not. Okay.
Not so much.
End of speech.
Yeah, obviously, well, Councilor Antipas understands a lot more. Of course, he's an attorney, but he understands this a lot more than I do. I'm having a hard time getting my arms around the whole proposal. What I'd be curious to know is Mayor Galbraith or anybody from the city council, the deputy mayor is here too. You've had this presentation already too. No, you haven't. I thought I read it here somewhere.
I've met with Bless you.
Okay, so you haven't had a time, because there's financial ramifications in the city too, not to the degree there is in the town. I just like to get a feel for how you feel, and I like to also get a feel for how the town manager feels, so I can try to understand this a little bit better. I could ask Mark to go first, Mary, so he could think a minute, or we could go the other way. But
I'd like to ask, which would inform how I would feel about it.
Well, maybe that's my way of recognizing and asking. I just need to try to understand this a bit more than I actually do. So.
Do you want to go first, Mark, or you want me to go first? Go ahead. Okay, so I want to drill down on some of the things that Councilor Antipas asked. So you indicated that you would be paying the amount that's in the schedule even if the taxes went down, but on the agreement that you sent us, it said, in no event shall the property pay an amount higher than would otherwise be required without this tax incentive agreement. So if the taxes went down, you'd expect this to lower as well. If theoretically, next year's taxes were less than, theoretically, less than this year's taxes.
So I think this document was a black line from a deal that we had done in Bridgeport that I think is referenced in here. So I think that was in that agreement, but I think what we've proposed here, and what our thinking is that these would be fixed payments over this schedule, and they wouldn't be decreasing, or decreased in the event that there was a different assessed value or whatever. So you're right that the document does read that way right now, but that would be something that would be taken out.
Okay. I wanted to also drill down on the questions that the counselor was asking about the improved value to the property. So one of the ways of looking at improved value of the property is what you're spending your $18.5 million on. One of them is a new building, which would normally add value to the property. So is that building 3,500 square feet in total, or is that the footprint?
No, that's in total.
That's total.
That's total.
Okay. So is it possible to get a breakdown on where you're spending the 18.5? You've given us a list of things, but like what percentage of the 18.5 is on appliances and things like that, or siding, or what proportion has to do with landscaping, which has no improvement value in terms of property taxes?
Sure.
So it's possible to get that. That would be great.
Absolutely.
So one of the reasons that we give, or the town gives tax incentives usually is economic benefit. So you've listed in the agreement what the beautification benefits are. What are the economic development benefits? There's no permanent jobs being added, correct?
Correct.
Are you hiring local people to do the construction work, or bringing your own people in?
It's to be decided. We always like to work with local people when the proper tradesmen are available in the area. So if that's a way for us to work with you more closely, for you to recommend said people, we'd be happy to talk about that and try to incorporate that into the plan.
But there's no guarantee in here of any economic benefit. It would.
Right.
What do you see as the economic benefits? I mean, that's usually what a tax incentive.
Sure.
revolves around.
So there's obviously the purchase of a lot of materials that are going to be spent on the property. So siding, windows, roofing, that of course may or may not be purchased right here or potentially somewhere else. There's also, if there are jobs created during the construction period, so normally there's a need for people to help and assist during the construction, either if it's tradesmen who are local or other support people who help get the job done. And then thirdly, if the residents are doing better and are doing other things and are improving their lives and are improving their jobs, there's sales taxes, there's all kinds of things that ultimately happen when a property is improved. Can I put a number on that specifically? No, I cannot.
The improvements that you're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I can see from the improvements you're talking about, other than the new building, they don't outlive the time of the tax and the tax stabilization. So any appliance isn't probably going to last 30 years. The siding isn't going to last 30 years. The roof isn't going to last 30 years. So they all would. Okay. So.
Right. So like any property, we have a replacement reserve schedule that we set up. So when we close, we fund a replacement reserve that presumes that certain things have useful lives. So appliances on average need to be replaced every 5 to 7 years, so forth and so on. So yes, all of those things will be replaced as they need to be through our 30-year ownership period.
One of the things that is prominent in the agreement is the commitment to spend $18.5 million. Is that a commitment that you're making to us, or is that a commitment you've made to others, and what happens if it doesn't happen?
Well, relative to a commitment we're making to you, yes, that is. And relative to others, the others that we have to interact with are typically our debt and equity investors. So whoever's providing the mortgage through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and then the purchaser of the tax credits that Dave described. So as you can imagine, they have their own team of consultants who descend on the property and evaluate what we plan to do and how much we plan to spend and what we plan to spend it on. If they're not comfortable with the scope of work that we've put forth, then we negotiate with them to either increase it or move money from one place to another or so forth. So it's all a very highly vetted process through the underwriting of those debt and equity sources. So at the end of the day, we have a commitment to them memorialized in an agreement that says we will spend this much amount of money, we will accomplish the following things at the property.
So, excuse me, Bruce, so you don't understand, just as I don't understand a lot of things too. And that's what
Well, I
I'm
have questions based on the agreement that I've seen, and I understand the agreement is now based on different statutes, so then the first one we got, so that we'd have to do our looking into that statute and see the applicability, because
Correct.
one of the things we discovered in this was that the statute that was being referenced only allowed for 20 years. I have questions about the things that are in here and the what-ifs. And as the counselor said about trying to decide, you know, what are we giving away here, and what's the value of what we're giving away.
I guess it's my way of saying that I'm not smart enough to ask the questions you're asking. So, I'm not, I don't know, but anyways. Maybe Mark could, is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I mean, I think it would be helpful. You know, Ted, we had a discussion fairly late this afternoon and about the enterprise zone, and so you know, the council has copies of the agreement that you had sent down, and also provided the mayor. So in your mind, how does that? Because an enterprise zone to me is very different. I mean, when I started going through Chapter 114 of the Connecticut City and Town Development Act and saw that this had to go to public referendum. Good luck with that.
That was the primary reason that, you know, one, we realized that the property was in fact in an enterprise zone, so it opened up.
So how would you see, you know, the enterprise zone's been here for 20 years, and probably Pfizer and EB have figured out every aspect of the enterprise zone, but I'm not aware that we've had any multifamily developers really take advantage of it, and as the council may or may not be, there's really two components of the enterprise zone. One is, you know, for businesses, industry, you know, it's pretty clear. You do something, you increase value, you get a benefit. Residential is a little bit different. So we've had some residential development, but not anywhere near this. So the delta, as far as I know, is still on the increase in value of the project. You're spending a lot of money per unit, but we've had other projects in town where people buy a property, spend a ton of money, but it doesn't necessarily increase the value. So I'm kind of, I think where Marion is, you know, having picked up that you're looking at the enterprise zone program, which would probably be easier. How does this agreement change, or in general terms? Because this is what everybody's looking at, is this agreement, and my gut sense is probably the next agreement's going to be very different, but maybe not. And I don't know if you've done work in enterprise zones in the state at this point.
When we were doing the research on the enterprise zone, we found that the legislature really did intend it to cover two things, both commercial but also affordable housing specifically, and residential housing. And so we thought that this would be a really great fit. As to the agreement, you know, the details will be worked out a little bit more, but it will be the basic format. This type of agreement was based on the one that was done in Bridgeport. The Bridgeport ordinance was based on both the Tax Incentive Act, but also on Section E of the Enterprise Zone Act. And so they used that as statutory authority to come up with the agreement. So I suspect that the form of the agreement, other than concerns both by the town council and the city council to be reflected in it, but the form will be similar to this, other than citing a different statute.
We've been trying to assemble some pieces of information and had come across minutes, John Reiner found them, of the Housing Authority meeting where some of this was talked about. There may have been other discussions, I don't know, but somewhere in these minutes it notes that the potential bond is $50 million. You're talking about around an $18.5 million renovation improvement cost. Where's the rest of the money going? Or is that just a high number?
The development budget, which uses all of the funds that come into the project, is comprised of acquisition costs, renovation costs, soft costs for all the professionals that are involved. On the financing, there are costs of issuance, as you can imagine. There's underwriter fees, there are bank fees, and of course, everybody who I just described has an attorney, so there are a number of attorney fees that are involved. And then we set up a rather healthy number of escrows, both operating reserves, replacement reserves, and then also contingency items. And of course, as a developer, we're entitled to a developer fee to undertake the deal. So if you add up all those things, that equates to the bond amount plus the tax credit raise, which is about $27 million in tax credit raise.
Yeah, I think I picked up somewhere in here that for the housing authority, and this is a good thing as far as I'm concerned, the housing authority, while they will have very little, possibly no liability for the bonds, is going to be collecting a fee of around $375,000. Could you explain how that was determined? Is it a percentage of something?
It's a percentage on the issued bond amount. So I think in this case, it's,
Yeah, it was originally designed at 75 basis points, but then the number got fixed, so as the loan amount, I think, changed slightly from $48 to $59, the number got fixed. And 75 basis points is a pretty standard bond issuance fee. We've done deals in a number of places, and it's a pretty standard fee. That's what we had proposed, and they had agreed upon.
Mark, the number is going to be 55 million.
Okay.
And the question I have, if I may, is that the housing authority is going to borrow $55 million. And by virtue of this conduit financing, we're not going to be on the hook for anything, theoretically.
correct.
So my point is, we need to do some due diligence on our side of the transaction to make sure that's true. You know, it doesn't seem, because we have no capacity whatsoever to pay back $55 million.
Of course not.
Okay, so
And there, to answer that, there is a very key professional attorney who's involved in this process. And they serve as what's known as bond counsel. So they're the ones who understand the transaction, provide an opinion as to the tax exempt nature of the bonds, and then they will also clearly explain how, under no circumstance whatsoever, does the housing authority have any liability at all. This concept of local issuance of bonds through either housing authorities, or some states use what are called IDAs, which are otherwise known as industrial development authorities. It's common practice throughout the country where, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars of bonds are issued. So she can certainly provide all those.
it's too good to be true, you know. So,
It's how the business.
due diligence is a good word.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm sure any questions you have of her, she can answer them for you.
So it sounds to me like there needs to be some more research on our end, and we can't come to any conclusion tonight. Like, it seems like it's opened the door for some more discussions. So,
Sorry. pardon
no,
me.
go ahead.
That was our hope tonight,
Yeah.
Mayor, was to really answer any initial questions, explain who we are and what we plan to do with the project, and open the discussion.
Yeah.
Really was our goal this evening.
Deputy Mayor Hedrick, did you want to ask something?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. In regards to your comment about the lender, you had said that you had your own financing set up. Is the lender you're using, are they a part of your larger company, or are they independent?
Completely independent. So the ultimate lender, which we haven't chosen yet, will be a brand name that you're familiar with, someone like a Citibank or a Wells Fargo or one of those types of lenders.
And then how does the 8A expiration impact this?
The which?
You said, one of the things you said is that the 8A,
Section 8.
the Section 8, right, thank you. The Section 8 is going to expire this year. How does that impact this, or does it?
Well, as preservationists, so what we do when we purchase properties like Branford Manor is we go to HUD, who's the administrator of the Section 8 contract, and we seek to renew that. HUD does not issue any new project-based Section 8 contracts, but they do renew ones that are expiring. So we would go to HUD and obtain a 20-year contract with HUD to continue to provide the Section 8 assistance.
So there would be an expectation of the renewal of the
Correct.
Section 8.
Correct.
And that'll happen on the day of closing, so even though the expiration is at the end of the year, we'll go in and ask HUD on the day of closing, which we're projecting to be August, to have it run from 20 years from that day going forward. So
And
it'll
that's
be in place.
20 years is the longest contract that HUD currently offers.
I had just one thing, I had a question that maybe you can provide the answers for in the future. I understand you're preserving the, you say the affordable housing, and I understand what you're asking for. Can you give us an idea of what revenue you're gonna make? So, I mean, I'd be more inclined to look at what we're giving you as a benefit to the revenue that you're making. In other words, if your revenue continues to grow at, I'm making up the numbers, 10%, but you're seeking a 0 to 3, 3%, I'd want to see the relationship of the two. And, if your revenue was increasing at a higher rate, I think you're looking at, you understand what I'm saying? Like
Absolutely. And we can, going through the details of a pro forma
Sure.
right now doesn't make sense, so we can share information on that. I will also say that as you can imagine, with a transaction of this size, there are numerous guarantees that we have to provide to various partners. So the investor who's going to be purchasing the tax credits requires a guarantee on our behalf that those tax credits will be delivered over the next 10 years, as well as the lender is going to require that we deliver what we say we're going to deliver in terms of completing the project and other aspects. So if the project doesn't perform, which is not our history to have projects that don't perform, obviously we're on the hook to make our partners whole. So obviously any return that we make on a transaction is in our mind balanced against the risk that we obviously undertake to do that deal. But we can certainly
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I just think that when you're looking at the break that you're looking for, I think someone brought it up, that we've seen in the past, we've seen the tax abatement to be, 2 years 0, the next year 1%, the fourth year 2%, and then
Sure.
then you're made whole with us, and you go on whatever it is it's going to be at assessed value. So when you're going out 30 years like this, it does, and the first 10 are at 0, it does make your.
Yeah, we typically seek a 30-year period because of the fact that the financing is a 30-year financing program normally. And also, quite frankly, this type of real estate is not inexpensive to manage and operate. And we like to seek, as Dave described, predictability as well as numbers that work in our underwriting. And that really is important on a HUD subsidized property because they can, over time, become very expensive to operate.
And I think that the numbers that you give will put it into perspective, so.
Sure.
Help us. Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to point, I do think it would be a good idea, and Marion and I haven't had a chance to talk about this, but I think the process would be best served if we could get town staff and city staff together to meet with representatives, maybe not all of you, whoever you want, and try to work out some of the details. We need to digest the whole enterprise zone end of this, because as I said, we've been really focusing on some other statute at this point. One thing I did want to point out, as the council is aware, we're in the process of doing a reval, which becomes effective October 1st. I have no idea what that means for this property. But given that it's so close, I would like to think that we would want to use that new number. I think we have an assessed value on this property right now of around $15.5 million, if I remember correctly.
Appraised.
Whereas, a little bit across town, we have a 300-unit development, very different, but it's around $42 million. So, and we're seeing that apartment, our sense is apartments are very much in demand, even these. And these are tired units, with all due, these are very tired units. I almost hate to say it, but Mark Deno is here, and to some degree, this project, it almost reminds me of the PPV that we did up at the subbase, where, they privatized Navy housing, and it was all done in an effort to infuse new money and to redevelop those units. Very different structure, but kind of the similar concept. And so for those of us who thought that was a good thing at the time to take those 1,500 units or whatever and spiff them up and really rebuild most of them and renovate some of them, it was a good thing. But we need to, I certainly need a lot more information I don't even know the questions to ask at this point, but I think between the mayor's staff and Paige and John Reiner and the assessor, we'd like to have a sit-down with you sooner as opposed to later, so we can wrap our arms around this.
Mayor?
Your presentation indicates that you are looking to have this decided by June 2nd?
It's probably aggressive.
I wondered how hard and fast that was.
Well, under our contract, we need to close in August. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that we have enough time, once the taxes are set, in order to finalize the other aspects of the deal. So I think June 2nd is aggressive, and also probably not the drop-dead date for getting something like this figured out. But I do think that sometime in the month of June is when we need to sort of hammer out what an agreement would look like.
Councilor Antipus, and we'll wrap it up after.
Yes, as promised. You know, I'm reminded of, I hate to bring this up like this, but I really am reminded of a Seinfeld episode where he was dating a woman that just looked different in different lights. I don't know if anybody recalls this. And I keep looking at this sentence at the end, and now I'm back to thinking, like the mayor is, that I was right the first time. I'm reading it again. In no event shall the property pay an amount higher than would otherwise be required without this tax incentive agreement. Now I'm reading it back again. It's a cap.
Right, so that unfortunately is an existing in an other agreement that we use as a red line to show an example, so that sentence would not exist.
Okay, because when we're all done talking about what we think it means, there'll be the language when we're all gone. So it just, again, just something to think about, and thank you for offering that.
So the next steps would be the mayor, town manager getting together, talking things out, and then getting with you guys.
Perfect.
Moving forward with it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You may.
Big transition here anyways.
You taking a break?
Well, there's a big transition.
We're going to take a 3-minute for transition purposes.
That's what I was hoping.
All right, we're back. We're back and better than ever. So the next items on the agenda are, there's 4 of them, all having to do with the school facilities initiative. And the next 4 are. So what we'd like to do is have the Board of Education members who are here and the School Facilities Task Force members who are here and come up to the U, so we can have a discussion about what's taking place. It's a no. Well, I was just looking, because I didn't want them on the O side, so.
It's a UU.
He said the same thing the same time. I know what you mean. Takes care of the O.
Thank you, Town Manager Mark. And as people speak, want to remind you to make sure there's a microphone in front of you so that people at home can hear you.
Yes.
Right? And John, are you going to kick it off?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so John Heller, who was the main person in the task force.
And then we'll shift. So, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Board of Ed members and counselors. Thanks so much for having us. Again, I'm John Heller, the chairman of the School Facilities Initiative Task Force, and we are back. We were here just a couple weeks ago, but we are back. I want to start off just by putting out a little disclaimer of a lesson that my mother taught me some years ago, which is, Mom said that the first rule of righteous indignation is to be right. And so I'm putting that out as both a prophecy and a little disclaimer that, you know, I'm going to say some things tonight, and I hope I'm right. I think I'm standing on the side of the angels, but, you know, if for some reason I'm off by something, I put that little disclaimer out. But yes, as I was quoted as saying, the situation that we're in now is a bummer, and I want to quote myself, wow, that is unfortunate, but here we are. So following the proper procedures, as we briefed you all some weeks ago, we went for special legislation. We went up to the State House to try to get special dispensation for our situation, our very unique situation. We met with Commissioner Curry's staff 4 times. She was in the room for one of those meetings throughout the last 6 or so months. We knew we were jumping in a year early on getting our bond up there. And again, this was special legislation that we were shooting for. During that whole process, at no point did the staff ever indicate that jumping in the year early would be an issue. We were well aware of the process, and Representative Scott guided us through that process up there in his offices. He did a very nice job. We always intended to meet a June 16 deadline to actually file our grant application. The state encouraged us to continue to do that. We always knew cost was going to be an issue. But we are encouraged to keep going to put that application now as per the regular process. So here we are. As the Commissioner Curry made very clear, she's not putting this forward into the legislative session. So we're going back to an earlier plan that we had, which was to, instead of going for the special legislation, we're going to go for a regular grant application. We think we could qualify for a diversity grant. As you know, this year we are barely in compliance with our Claude Chester School. We've been out of compliance for years, but we're in compliance thanks to the redistricting that the Board of Ed has done so many times to get us into compliance. But we're forecasting that this next year we'll be back on the dark side of that line. We'll be back out of compliance with that school, and so we'll need to figure something out. So we've sharpened our pencils and went back to our renovate like new plan that we're going to give you some numbers on tonight that will reduce some costs to us, but we'll also be still having to look for a waiver from the state's $450 per square foot limit. But one more time, that's where we sit right now. We knew the procedures. Representative Scott guided us through that process, which, by the way, is not a very transparent process. It's not very easy to navigate that process, but he deftly got us the guidance and advice. He and our consultant, Mr. Zuba, guided us through that process, I think, very well. One more time, we're going for special legislation. They didn't grant us special legislation. It's like asking your mom for permission, but we're still following the House rules. We were looking for special permission. To deviate from the normal rules, and we weren't granted that. But it's not that we didn't know what we were doing. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Zuba to give us some more details on that.
Yeah, thanks, John. And we knew that the application would be going in June, and we weren't asking to be on the bond bill for this year at all. But what we were asking to be on would be some consideration for our project, which would be up and coming in the coming year. And we pretty well articulated what the situation was in Groton with some past referendums and why we would need some assurances on what additional dollars we would be able to get in gaining support to be able to have a successful referendum. One of the interesting things as part of the process is that in order to qualify for a diversity grant, it's all predicated on students that are in the seats on October 1st. It doesn't matter if it's different in May, in April, in January, if that deviation from the 25% is there. It's all based on October 1st, and when we began this planning process, and during the years of we were in the process, Claude Chester was actually in compliance. It just so happens to be that the way the legislation is drafted, your grant application and the racial imbalance have to occur in the exact same time frame, making it a very sticky situation if you're one of those school systems that has made good faith effort to be able to be in compliance with the state mandate. If you were one of the school systems that was so far out of compliance where you stood no chance at wavering below the line, and didn't go through the efforts, then you were sort of rewarded at the state level with the diversity grant. But here that wasn't the case. But either way, what John had mentioned is that, you know, we've taken a look at the building program and really where the state is and where Groton is financially. And we looked at the option of building 2 new schools on both of the middle school sites. And what was part of our process and part of the task force plan early on was to be able to renovate those schools as new. So we've drawn back into that part of the plan, and that is the idea going forward, that would be part of the building program. It saves some pretty significant dollars overall. There are pros and cons to it in that rather than having concurrent building projects, as you can see in the schedule that we've provided, you would have to take on the middle school project first and then get into the renovate like new of the existing middles as elementaries. One of the benefits is that it would be an unoccupied renovation. However, one of the cons of it is that it pushes it a little further back in the timeline, and that we wouldn't be looking at an opening not till 21-22 school year overall. So there could be a midpoint move that would be something that would have to be decided upon. But 2 of the things that are built into this are when we had presented last time the reimbursement for the state, they've now put the preliminary numbers out, or those numbers that aren't final yet, but they're the numbers that we are guided to use for fiscal year 16-17. And when we were back here in the springtime, we were looking at about 54% for for renovate like new, and now that number has increased slightly for Groton to 57% or 57.5%. And for new construction, it went from 45% or 44.5% up to 47.5%. So that is one of the positives in it. The cost estimates that we have provided on page 3, you'll see overall we went from about $196 million building project down to about $184 million building project. This is on the conservative side. We have plug numbers built in, which we're going to be continuing to refine. Those are for the land conversion of the Merritt property. It's in the process now of going through appraisal and negotiations with the state. We know that the plug number we put in was on the high side, so we're looking, some flexibility in that number, as well as being able to, once you get into the process of schematic design, we know the 84 million net cost of Groton, you can likely get a much greater level of reimbursement out of that and maximize what Groton's cost is once you get into the design of that. So having the 84 million as the hold number is really the highest it could be. We picked the highest end of our range for the number to bring forward to the council. So we're thinking that it could be likely somewhere lower than that. But overall, it's still delivering the same program that we had envisioned for the town as part of the Groton 2020 process. It was the program that we have talked about for over 2.5 years. The vision and being able to do the middle school, that has not changed at all. It's really just the nature of the projects at the elementary school level, reusing the 2 buildings rather than building new on the site and then demoing the buildings. Overall, where we're standing now in the process is still eyeing up getting a grant application, and in June we have all of the legwork done. All of the estimates and all of the boxes to check are there. We're just looking for the authorization to be able to go ahead and keep marching forward with the Groton 2020 plan. Ultimately, it comes down to being able to bring the project to the state and then going through the traditional process, as they refer, to be able to ask for those waivers, especially the waiver on renovating an older building that exceeds the litmus test of $450 a square foot. We know that's nothing new for the state. I believe there was 18 different projects that were in the bill this year to be able to seek different changes in compensation that didn't fit the traditional process. Some of those were waivers on the exceedance, some of those were space waivers. So it's really built into the process. This is kind of how it fits in. Where we see it, though, is sort of the unknown is what's going to happen over at Gloucester School. Looking at the early kindergarten enrollment numbers and looking at the 5th grade class that is moving on to the middle school, we have a good indication of the demographics there, and understanding that, barring any major changes, it'll be very, very close to be able to get to that exceedance if it does happen. It is a benefit to the building program in that it provides a new vehicle to be able to get a larger reimbursement than we normally would have been able to get. That's not saying that it would stop there. We don't know what the current status is once we move this forward. If we did fall short by a student, I think like John mentioned, the latest number was about 8 students, or was 8 students that created the imbalance. Whether it's one student, how the state or how DAS or DCS would look at that at the time, because it's one of those things where this can go on for indefinitely, of being above the mark, below the mark, and essentially trying to adhere to this mandate. So it creates a very challenging situation. We hope that, if we did get to that point in time, that, they would be willing to have some conversations and be able to give us some guarantees on being able to help us and move the program forward. But as it stands now, we see there's a very reasonable chance of not needing that extra lift or that extra support. We have a small package today just to get you up to speed. I apologize for not getting it out ahead of time. This has been a little bit reactive in that we've learned the news last week, had a meeting where we were able to come down and put some thoughts together and be able to move a plan which we think is in the best interest of Groton, as well as being able to deliver everything the task force had envisioned for their hard work. But it's really getting back into the hands of the council now, knowing that this has changed in your eyes from where we were a little while ago, but also that when we were here, we talked about there was no guarantees. We were, looking at it as an opportunity. It was just the unfortunate timing of what is happening now up in Hartford, and in years past, it may not have fallen to the same fate as it did this year.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to open it right up to the counselors for questions and see where we go from there. Councilor Grimm?
So this would assume that you'd fill out an application for the whole project at once?
There would be 3 separate applications, one for each component, one for each construction project.
And it would be filed this year, by June 30th?
Yeah.
And you get it all approved at once? Is that the plan?
For approved, when you say approved at the state?
Right.
Yeah, they would review all 3 projects at once, knowing it's part of a bigger plan, but they view them as 3 separate building projects.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, was always the plan.
Yeah, it was always the plan to have a grant application in June. The reason we went to the state a year early was knowing that local referendums here are tough, and that if we saw an opportunity for special legislation, especially when this given year we had lost the opportunity for the diversity grant, and due to the numbers, that they would be some willingness to assist there, because we're being held to really an unfunded mandate. But it was always the plan to get the grant applications in June and have a referendum in November. And now, as following the traditional process, there will be conversations in next year's session.
Harry?
Yeah, what are you gonna do to unconfuse the voters? I have got a grasp of what's going on myself here, but I'm at meetings all the time, and I happen to know somebody on the Board of Education. So the voters are very confused now. They really are.
Well, I would say that, Councilor Watson, that we're back to the way that we usually go for these kinds of projects. I'm looking for my righteous indignation checker here.
Yes.
That the town goes to referendum, gets approval from the town to put forth the whole proposal, and then you go to the state looking for a grant to help some matching funds. We can put out cost estimates about what that grant would be, and that's what we plan to do. We were told and advised by DAS that an alternative avenue was to go seek special legislation the year early to see if you could get that compensation earlier. So we're going back to Plan A.
We were burned.
Sir?
We were burned. That's the way I look at it.
I don't want to say that. If you want to say that.
I can say that.
Yes, sir. Again, I liken it to we were going to ask for special permission to do a sleepover, and Mom said no. And that doesn't mean that we're in trouble. That doesn't mean that we violated any rules. It doesn't mean we're going to get grounded. It just means Mom said no. So I think we were looking for something special. We didn't get it. We'll go back to the regular process.
And we have some legwork to do with the voters.
That's what I want to hear.
There's some hard work, and for those that have been following, and I know when we were canvassing the public and people were following what was going on, this changes near the end aren't new to Groton or any building project. A lot of them tweak. Substantively, the Groton 2020 plan still involves consolidating 3 of the elementary schools, consolidating 2 middles down to 1 middle school. The only thing is changing is cost savings. It's going to be a less cost to the taxpayer. It's looking at reusing the older buildings, basically shelling them, renovating them completely like new, adding on about 11 to 12,000 square foot additions on each, being able to retain some of the site features, the athletic fields that were going to be displaced as part of the prior project, that will remain, but ultimately we need to be able to explain why we're here now and so the voters understand. The logic behind the plan hasn't changed, the reasoning, the issues haven't changed at all. All it is the mechanism of how the elementary education is going to be delivered. It's going to be a reuse of the building, it's going to be a renovation of the building rather than building a new building, and it's strictly financial.
And just one more thing, Councilor Watson. From my perspective, yes, this is going to cost us more. We were asking for 141 million. We're not going to get that. We'll ask for less. I want to reassure the voters to keep it clear to you and them as a voter that we knew what we were doing. We didn't skip any procedures. We didn't do anything wrong. It's not that we didn't know the proper procedures. We did follow the steps needed for school construction. We're following those steps. I want to reassure the voters that we have our act together. And again, Representative Scott deftly guided us through that process in his role in Hartford to follow those set procedures.
Simply put, we saw that circumstances here versus what other communities face in Connecticut are vastly different. We're being held to a mandate that some others don't actually go through in good faith efforts follow through on trying to meet that. Groton did, and we brought it to the state in showing that yes, we've gone through this. We've taken the necessary steps. However, we're looking to you now to permanently solve the problem in hopes that we can get a hand up. Unfortunately, it was a leap of faith, and it didn't work. We said no guarantees. There was a lot at play, and if you read the news, you're following what's going on. You know that there's many more issues at the state. Timing could have been part of it. However, everybody is still committed to the plan. We're looking at what is still being able to deliver the impact that it's needed at the least amount of cost to the taxpayers. So the concession is to be able to go to a renovate like new on the buildings.
Dr. Grenier?
I want to echo what Councilor Watson said. I think we were burned. And when I read the newspaper report the other day, actually Representative Scott read it to me, and he said this is going to be negative, and I knew the truth, and I knew that the article reported facts that did not occur, and in my mind I thought, well, everyone's going to see through this, but what happened to us happened to us. So I just give you the last 8 days. Last Monday night I was at home, and Representative Scott called me and said, if you could come up here, I'd really appreciate it. And I called Chairman Watson, and we in fact went to the state and up to the Capitol, spent 12 hours there, essentially lobbying for a bill. And John, I cannot say enough about Representative Scott. He introduced us to House leadership. We met with the Senate, some of the Senate leaders. Senator Formica from Waterford and East Lyme was really helpful. And they kept on saying to us, where's the bill? Where's the language? And I knew that I had met with the staff, and I met with Commissioner Curry, who gave us her personal assurance that she would make sure the bill was written. I spoke to the person who wrote the language. It's a fairly simple amendment, but I spoke to that person. I spoke to Mike Zuba and our architect, who went up for 2 other meetings. We had been working since, I think it was January 10th. John submitted the bill language on January 27th. We knew all of that, and I thought, and frankly, John thought, that there was some glitch in delivering the bill. So here we were lobbying for 12 hours, essentially making fools of ourselves, because there was no bill, there was no language. And the next day, when John met with the commissioner admitted that she had withdrawn the bill. having, unfortunately, forgetting to tell us as we sat there for 12 hours on the bench, waiting to talk to these people. And then when she made the statement that she made, that has become quite public, it is extremely damaging. And I think you're right, Harry. The damage that has been done to a lot of hard work, and as I keep referring to Representative Scott, John opened the door for us. We knew nothing about this, and in early January, he invited us to his office, and lo and behold, the top officials from the Department of Administrative Services were there, and I thought, wow, this is great. We're really getting the ground rules, and they explained to what was going on, and John had his legal assistant there, and who was going to write the bill, and all of that. And then, of course, when we went back in mid-January to meet with the commissioner, and we took Representative Winkler with us, and there was a great deal of warm feelings between the commissioner and Representative Winkler, and we're going to help you, and so forth. And something happened. I don't know what happened. I think the part of the obvious answer is that the state is trying to cut nearly $1 billion. So when you're asking for a request, and by the way, we are already entitled to $94 million. So when people hear you're asking for 141, we weren't asking for 141. We already had 94 in our pocket. The question was, could we go from 94 to 141? So we were asking, if my math is right, about 46 million dollars. That was the request, and a simple answer from the commissioner could have been, "I'm really sorry. This is a tough year. We're cutting budgets like crazy, and we're not going to be able to do it." And she could have told us that when she pulled the bill, before Kim and I went and made this public display of ourselves, advocating, lobbying quite articulately for a bill that was never written. And we found out 24 hours later that the bill was never written. And then to find out, after talking to, I think, a very responsible journalist, Deb Strasheim, called me and said, "This is what the commissioner said." And I said, "Well, that's not true. We worked for 4 months. We knew what we were doing, as John said. Mike has done this many times. We knew exactly what we were doing. We knew exactly the procedure." But I've been confronted, perhaps as some of you have, by members of the public, who basically say, you didn't follow the right procedure. Who's to blame? And I don't think. I really do believe. While there may be some underhandedness here, I think the money part of it hurt us, and so now we have a public who has been told one set of facts. And from my perspective, the council has two alternatives: to go forward, looking at your crystal ball to see if we would in fact be successful asking the voters, despite all the noise that's out there, would you support an $84 million bond at taxpayer expense? Or saying to, I would turn to Mayor Flax and say, let's appoint another commission and do Plan B and come back and break it up. The board and I talked about this last night, breaking it up into more bite-sized pieces. For example, my plan only, no one else's. If we took S.B. Butler and Colchester School and created a diversity school as step one, it would cost $12 million to the taxpayer. Could we do that as step one? I think we could. My plan only, I'm not selling it. I'm just suggesting that if another smaller task force, a lot of good work has already been done, but if there was another task force, another committee essentially, put together with some of the folks that are sitting around this table, I believe, not by June 30th, but I believe that we could put a plan together. But it seems to me that's what the town council has in
I think it's an important point to realize that the committee that was put together is pretty much done. You know, you met, you submitted a plan, and it was handed to the council and the Board of Ed, and, you know, it's our turn to figure out what to do next. Of course, that is one option. I know, Councilor Antipas, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I had a question. This had to do with the, and this would be the time to correct me, and you can do it in any manner you wish. So originally, we were hoping, and I understand completely that that nothing was guaranteed. This is how I understood it, and I'm hoping that everybody else understood it the same way. That if all went well, we would be net asking the voters to cough up $55 million. Under this proposal, the scaled back proposal, we're looking at $84 million. Is that the comparison?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Given what we were told in the initial presentations, that it was a market analysis, if you will, of what, you know, were you to support a school project, school improvement, how much would you tolerate? That there was a majority support, over 50%, for something in the range of $55 million. How do you think the $84 million would fare now?
Well, when we had asked the question revolving around the original number, which was about 94 million, was in the public opinion survey, we had 52% support at that number. However, it was plus or minus 4%. So when we looked at the numbers and we asked the same question at several price points now, and we were able to create a curve on that. So we saw that if we were able to get the cost down, we knew that at 55 million, based on our public opinion survey, that we were around 58, 60%. That's why we felt good about that number. And when we had talks with the state, because we were going out of process, they did not want to provide a lift up to Groton if it was something that wasn't going to pass locally. So that was all part of, you know, positioning for that number. However, where we originally stood before we took that leap of faith, we were at about a $94 million project last year, and that had, you know, support of right around 50%. So with $10 million less, granted, the nature of the renovation versus new construction has changed slightly. We still see it as a potentially viable project moving forward. It's just for everybody being able to get their heads wrapped around sort of the changes there.
Yeah, I mean, my suggestion would be, don't confuse yourselves. I mean, you folks, you've done sterling work as far as I'm concerned in terms of presentation and analysis, and I cannot imagine the total number of hours you've all spent. You're probably headed for beatitude of some sort, in some church somewhere. Yeah, I think there's no question that a lot of voters would look at this and just look at it from, they don't want to get into the details, they're going to look at it from the point of view of money, and you just can't help that part. You can only do so much explaining. But there is another segment, and I brought it up before, that don't like the idea of the single middle school. But there is, in that group, there are people that might be convinced, if you demonstrate, get it out somehow, I don't know how else you would do it, that notwithstanding that you've got one school, that the grades would in fact be separated, that the argument of, well, you know, you're going to lose kids at a very tender age has been addressed, not programmatically, but physically. That might get you over the line if that's what you're looking to do.
Yeah,
but you know your business, so.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, I think something that we had talked about a lot, but wasn't really brought to light, and especially until now with, you know, the recent state of budgets, is that whether you agree philosophically with how education is going to be deployed, 2 middle schools or 1 middle school, when you have 2 smaller buildings operating independently and you combine them together, there is a tremendous amount of economy there, especially when you look at how teams are done with the teachers, and you look at support staff, everything it takes sort of behind the scenes to run the building. So not only are you looking at a great savings from just going from 2 middle schools to 1, we're also talking about going from 3 smaller elementary schools, that 2 section per grade elementary schools are one of the most inefficient K-5 systems out there. We're in all sorts of those. Being able to go from 3 of those to 2, where you're looking at having much better adherence to your class size guidelines, greater savings on building administration, maintenance, as well as staffing, teaching staff, building administration. I see Ms. Austin with her hand up. You probably you want to chime in? No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, we've even looked at numbers, and I know you had kind of gone over that again.
Want to pass the microphone down?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you, but it won't make it on the tape.
So we've even done some analysis looking at taking 4 schools offline into the 2. And I know that the numbers were pretty tight, but you know, that was something that we were examining, and Mike kind of went through that to see, could that be possible? And it would really be a cost savings over time. I think that we could probably figure out what that would be, and I think that's something we need to look at in the long run, especially with the older buildings that are, you know, really costing us a lot to repair over time. So it would be a savings with personnel, with staff, and with the building facility.
Yeah, we had tested that option today with the state of, you know, operational costs and budgets, and, you know, everybody in the state is going towards, you know, being able to deliver education at a less costly option than they are today, and that's truly through consolidation with declining enrollment. And, you know, the elementary schools are going through some declining enrollment. There's a movement of students to the magnet schools and the other offerings in the region, but we looked at it today using the current numbers, and you know, it could have been accomplished, but for sake of 2 seats. We came short by 2 seats, ultimately. And that was with pulling portables offline, doing everything that we had planned for in the plan. So we know it's very viable. We know that enrollment is going to continue to decline, but at what rate is what we question. It's not something we want to put out there as a definitive today, but is a very real possibility, especially if New London gets their full pathways online earlier. The funding of the magnet programs in the state is very much up in the air, as well as ECS. But we just wanted to make people aware that that is a real possibility for even larger savings in addition to what we're currently estimating. And we're being very conservative when we're saying this is at least $2.5 million. We didn't even talk about instructional staff at all, which is a huge driver in budget considerations, because we know that there is definitely going to be instructional staff savings when you go from, say, 350 student elementary schools into 2 larger 600-student elementary schools. You're going to need less teaching staff. You're going to have better class sizes right at your targets in addition to everything else. So we know that number at the bare minimum is 2.5 reoccurring annual savings. It's just what else could it be?
Councilor Morton.
Yeah, I think this development is just heartbreaking on so many levels. The thing I'm concerned about was, I remember when we were meeting the first time with the task force, and the whole issue of where was the threshold that we thought, as far as pricing goes, where we could be pretty sure we might have a reasonable expectation of the voters approving it, and it was the $55 million mark. I'm really concerned now because when we voted on moving forward with this plan, the question came up with, we realized that there was no guarantee of the state funding, but at the same time, I think we assured all of the viewers who were watching that if we did not get the money that we expected to from the state, then this was dead on arrival. I mean, those are the words we used. We won't be moving forward. If the state reneges or doesn't come through, then we're done. And now we're sitting here. The state, I think, has lost all trustworthiness as far as I'm concerned, and I think a lot of taxpayers. I don't think the state can be trusted now to do anything. I'm concerned because they're even looking to cut ECS money. I mean, let alone building money. They're looking to cut basic ECS grants. So given that, I think if we come before the taxpayers now and say, well, we didn't get it, but here's the new plan, It's only $30 million more dollars, but now we want you to do this. I don't think people are, because there's too many uncertainties. And I think that there's a huge risk that the voters are gonna vote this down again. And I don't think we can afford to have them turn down another school referendum. I mean, how many times can you do that before the people just get tired of it? I just think it's a bad idea to move forward.
Kevin?
I got to disagree with you, Councilor Morton. Yes, the last time here, you were one of the people who approved this along with the rest of the council. I knew your feelings. You were even willing to go along with the $55 million. I think we should go forward at this time because this plan has completely changed from the last referendum attempt several years back. The purpose of the one middle school right now makes more sense than the two because the population with two 800 student middle schools. We had 1,400 middle school students to carry that. We don't have that anymore, so it only makes sense to go with one middle school. And the location they came up with ends up being a wonderful location if it goes through. We put back online from the original plan what the people were promised on how the school system and the planning of this master plan was going to go. We're going to put an elementary school back in the city. They were all moved out. That means you have walkers, you have neighborhood schools still hanging around. People wanted that. So we're giving the people what they wanted going back to the master plan. The reval back in 2001 killed taxes for people. They raised them 3 times much. Councilor Barber, you're in the area. Your taxes went through the roof on that. 2 years later, on the second go around, they voted in the plan. It was reduced, but the amount of taxes people still had to pay isn't going to be that much different if this goes through at $84 million. If you get the old printout of what your taxes for the 20 years were, it's not going to be that much difference on a plan that is twice as much, larger schools for more students, and reducing Board of Education costs. I'm not saying you're saving a dime, you haven't received their budget. I'm not even talking about their budget. But you are going to reduce administrators, you are going to take schools off a line, and you're going back on the plan. It can be explained to the people, and I think it should go forward because we can all educate the people until the RTM approves this to send it to referendum, and then the PAC needs to do if their PAC is formed. But this is explainable. The young parents who have kids in school like their plan. It may not be new, but they like the plan of fixing their schools up, the new middle school, and fixing at least West Side and up into an elementary school. So many of those things are all what the people are looking for. Those who don't have kids in school, yes, their taxes, but we're still talking under $100 a year for the taxes. It isn't a breaker. You heard Ledge Light. Education is the key to everything around here. So I think we need to still move forward. God forbid it doesn't pass. Then we can start looking into Plan Bs that the education system might be talking about on options. But I think we should move forward with this.
Councilor De La Cruz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think now we're trying to break up plans and see what could do, right off the top of our head. After 3 years of 25 people meeting and coming up with this plan that, and what's not surprising, but what's disheartening, I think, is all these folks, me included, for the last 18 months, we put all this time into it, and we weren't pie in the sky stuff. We weren't looking for the gold toilets in the hallways lined with marble. We were looking for what we needed, and we came up with that plan, what we needed. So to even talk about 2 junior, all that is mute. We actually talked about all that stuff, and if the cost is $94 million, then the taxpayers, they should see it and have a chance to vote on it. Whether you like it or not, you can go to the polls and vote up or down on it. But I would certainly support it even at the 94, just because the state of Connecticut is absolutely running away from educating our kids. It doesn't mean that we have to, because they're kind of, I think they're almost trying to get out of the business of educating kids. Well, then we have to do it as a town. I mean, and we even heard, I talked to other people, and they say, well, in other states, they do county schools. Well, we have 42,000 people that live in Groton. We shouldn't have to put our kid on a bus and go 45 minutes to another town. We also have bad weather, so you can't compare us to Florida. We can't have kids on buses for 45 minutes in snow and rain. But let's leave it to the voters. I'm gonna do my part because I think it's a good plan. I mean, I didn't spend that much time, and it was probably the best group I was ever a member of, to see the different opinions and get funneled into that one opinion. And it was one of the proudest things we ever worked on, and it was great meeting all the new people, but all the different opinions started in 25 different directions, and we got to that one point. So to try to divide up the plan now and try to say, question what was done, it was so far beyond that. I was disappointed. I don't cry too often, but when I opened up the paper, it was close. Because I thought it was horrible. I thought they should have helped us out. We're a unique community, and they just didn't recognize it or didn't care. But it's up to us to educate our own kids. And if the state doesn't want to be part of it, then we have to do without them, I guess.
Councilor Watson, did you want to say anything before you?
Yeah, I have to leave early. I have an early flight. I have to get up to Hartford. Why don't we ask the commissioner to come down here? No? Well, why not ask her? I mean, to understand our town, I mean, there's just so many pieces to it. I've been around for a long time, and I go back to failed referendums. I was around when the last one passed, but that whole redistricting stuff and people calling me and, how come my kid has to go to this school when I can see this school from our house? Yep. That's where she's already gone. We spent $600 grand on transportation when we redistrict last time or something like that. I'm not sure that she understands what we're all talking about in the 3 years
I'm sure
of
she
hard
cares,
work.
Harry.
Oh.
If I could answer that, the school bonding bill will be handled in the special session that will hopefully happen later this week, but it'll go along with the budget. I don't think we should beat anybody up over this decision because we still need her.
I'm not talking about beat her up. I think that to try to make her understand what we're talking about, how many people have worked so hard to try to solve something that they're telling us to solve anyways.
And your superintendent of schools and your chairman of the Board of Ed did a really good job in Hartford the other day explaining that. But procedurally, we're actually at the point where we have to roll forward.
I'm frustrated.
Yeah, I'm frustrated too. I mean, there's a lot of stuff a lot of work that was put into it by myself and my staff up in Hartford and people around this table, and it's frustrating. And if I could just go back to Councilor Morton's statement, I understand your concern about not trusting the state, but with these school bonding packages, this is a process that a lot of towns are going through, and there's a lot of school construction projects that are going in under what we consider the normal process of the application by June and all that. For the state to come to the finish line on those projects and say, yeah, we promised you 47, but we're really going to give you 35, would not go over well. And those decisions are really being made by DAS. The process for these school construction bills is just about 100% of the work is done by DAS, where they approve all the applications and then they write the bonding language that's submitted to the legislature for approval. And so there's a main bill that has all of the schools that went through the regular process. And it's online. Like Ledyard had a referendum a year ago, and so there too, well, maybe in 3 schools are on that bill. And Stonington and a few other communities, all the schools that they're replacing or building as new are listed there as a regular part of the regular bill. What we were looking to do, and other towns were trying to do the same thing. I'm sure we're not the only ones. I still haven't had time to digest what other towns may have gotten stuck in this thing. But when the main bill hits the House floor, there's an immediate amendment made that includes notwithstanding language that we had hoped would include Groton's request for $141 million, and then there was other towns that are looking for $1 million here or $5 million there to fix something that maybe they messed up on the initial application process. And that was the amendment I was waiting for the language to come through on, and nobody would provide. So I think, rolling forward, I think we're safe in trusting the percentage numbers that Mike Zuba has been giving you with respect to what we would qualify for under certain circumstances, whether it be, I was writing numbers down quick, the 57% or the 47%, and then, if the diversity numbers hit the right mark, we could qualify for up to 80% on one of the buildings. So I think those percentages are trustworthy percentages because by June 30th, we'll have had the regular application and we'll go through the normal process rolling forward.
So Barbara?
You said that we pushed this through early. Why was that?
We were looking for special legislation to try and get 71%. Instead of, we knew we weren't qualifying for a diversity waiver that would give us 80%. We knew we weren't qualifying for that, and so we said if we can go ask for special legislation in this session, we would be able to tell the voters, hey, we've gotten approval to have the grant approved prior to the referendum. So it's not unheard of.
Right.
It is special, but it is done, and so that's why we were shooting for that.
If I could just
Yes, sir.
jump on that. You have to remember that over the last 5 years, Grotonese have been in or out of trouble with this diversity thing. And so as this committee fell over the finish line with their project, it was hard for them to identify what number because of where they're in or we're out.
Yeah.
So by doing what we did, it allowed us to identify a number that we could get from the state and then tell the taxpayers what we were working with.
Basically, if we have a good indication on October 1st exactly what that number is. However, the state process to finalize counting those students doesn't occur until the report is issued, which is early May. So there's a major lag there from reporting on
I understand that.
racial balance. So what we would try to do is to be able to get a good feeling of where we were at early on, knowing that for the confidence in the voter, knowing that if something would be set, that we would have a much better chance for a positive outcome at referendum, rather than leaving things up in the air kind of as they are now. It was more of a strategic move in hopes that we would be able to present our case and there would be some merit. There would be some merit to the decision-making process up in Hartford.
So my next question is, you scaled it back. Did you scale it back because the percentage is going to be less? That's what your thought process was?
And overall, we had 2 years ago, that's all we talked about was the renovate like new, and we didn't want to leave anything up to chance. And then as we went through the estimates with the architect and the cost estimator there, we found that there's this other law on the books that has been there for 10 years, but it's been little enforced of, if it costs more money than $450 a square foot to renovate a building, the state won't grant renovate like new status. And it wasn't until the last 2 years that they've actually stopped building projects in the middle of design and construction because they were exceeding that. So we wanted to be proactive in that, and we didn't want to get involved in that. So we moved towards new construction, which was a little more costly. But ultimately, we're falling back on that now and saying, boy, we would like a waiver from this, which there were a number of waivers this year as well. A lot of the hurdles that we're up against are just the state looking to ratchet down costs on construction.
My last question. I thought we've always been told that new construction, you get more percentage from the state as opposed to renovation. And now that's changed?
It used to be the same up until 6 or 7 years ago. You got the same amount whether it was renovate or new construction. And then what they began doing is incentivizing renovation to keep the total cost to the state down. So you get a 10 percentage point bump, 10 percentage point higher in reimbursement if you renovate like new renovate rather than going through new construction.
Councilor Deebus, is there something that?
Yes, yeah.
Quick.
And this ties into what Councilor Morton said and what others have covered, which is a very human instinct to look at the number and say, gosh, I don't have my mind around this thing, and this really is a high number, and I'm going to err on the side of caution, which the voters have done, which I myself have done in years past. But before you stick your fingers in your ears and say la, 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 and hope it all goes away, it won't, because I predict what'll happen is there'll be 5 to 10 years of rolling CIPs, which we will try to fend off. And we won't be able to do that indefinitely. And I think, as you said before, whether you're skeptical of this scheme or another plan or anything like that, there is no, I believe this much is true. There is no do nothing, there is no $0 option. Mayor Flax, you're probably right, that if the lowest option is still gonna cost us somewhere $50–60 million with the lowest level of reimbursement possible, and Groton will be able to brag about new roofs and new furnaces, which nobody sees, which are functional, of course, you need them, but that's where we're headed. So before people skip along and say nothing, there is no nothing. Something is going to be spent. It's going to be a lot of, like I said, we're going to be nickel and dime for a decade here, or less.
Dr. Grimm, go right ahead.
Question. So the 84 is based upon getting the diversity grant for the third item, right? But we won't know that till October 1st. Is that true? So how does that weigh in with the referendum, you know, going out to the public for the 84 number if we're not going to know the answer until October 1st about reimbursement rates?
Well, we would at least, if the referendum went forward, of course, the numbers are the official numbers are taken for public school information system on October 1st. So we would know the numbers that we are reporting, and therefore we would know if we exceeded no school, because we have 43% children of color in the district, no school can be 25% or more. So we would know that on October 1st. So between October 1st and November 8th, we would be able to make it clear to the public that in fact, Groton, that would not be a special request. That would simply be, Groton would be entitled to 80% reimbursement for the school that is being renovated or constructed to replace Colchester.
But maybe Mark can answer this. When we're drafting the referendum, don't we have to have a hard number sooner than that, or what is the process?
Well, the referendum has to authorize the entire dollar amount. Right. The explanatory text can go into a little bit of detail about where we think reimbursement dollars are coming from, and maybe in this case, there's a couple of different scenarios, but if I could, and I'm probably not going to say anything that you haven't already heard or somebody has already said, but just to kind of maybe put things in order, at least the way I look at this. You know, we've all been dealt a big surprise and a huge disappointment, and we can talk about that until the cows come home. But the reality is there's been 3 years of effort put into this, and lots of money, lots of consulting time, lots of staff time, and certainly lots and lots of committee membership time. The plan that has been laid out is not a new plan. This is really the original plan up until my recollection around January of this year.
This was Plan A.
This was Plan A, to build a new middle school and renovate the 2 existing middle schools into elementary schools. And it's been touched upon why we've changed, why it got changed to, you know, for new construction. And you can use those arguments against going ahead at this point, but we are where we are. And so, you know, in my mind, the first decision, or the first decision is the plan acceptable? And is the dollar amount something that we feel we can get approved by the voters? You certainly don't want to go forward with something where if the opinion is absolutely not, it's never going to get approved. And in fact, that's how we behave. You know, instead of being supportive of the initiative, we kind of kick it out the door in kind of a defeatist way. That it's absolutely, we're absolutely guaranteeing it's not going to be approved. So to me, the trigger is the understanding, this is a plan that's been talked about. This has not been concocted in the last 72 hours. This was a plan that had in fact been the preferred plan, or the plan we talked about the most up until around January or so. So the $84,000 trigger, it's not 50-something million. It is approximately $30 million more as a local match. Do we think it's doable? Do we think there's a better alternative out there? And the $84 million plan, in my mind, has two premises. One, the $450 waiver is provided for, but that won't be until the next legislative cycle. And or that provision gets rewritten. It's not just a waiver for Groton, but it's an antiquated 10-year-old plus or minus dollar amount that the state has not updated. So there is still something that has to happen in the next legislative cycle. We're not going to know that by November. And I would argue, even with the diversity grant, my understanding is, and you guys know it more than I, is while the survey is done in October, the official report doesn't come out to May of next year. So we actually just got the report saying formally we're not out of balance for the current year, even though we've known that since October. And there was some discussion. So, there's two options there. Maybe we'll be out of whack again on October, or maybe at this point we need to be making the argument to the powers that be that, listen, we're never going to make any progress here. We're in 1 year, out another year. Maybe there ought to be, the legislation ought to really address, listen, if a community 4 out of the last 5 years, 8 out of the last 10 years has been in and out of diversity, the diversity grant still applies. We want a permanent fix going forward, not, okay, do I have high blood pressure this time I go to the doctor or not? Chances are, if you have it enough, he or she's going to put you on some blood pressure medicine and take care of the problem, even though you may be lucky one time and not have high blood pressure.
Mark, could I just anecdotally or ancillarily add in there, it's not, luckily we weren't out of balance. We redistricted. Right. We moved families to 4 schools in 5 years to be in compliance.
Absolutely.
We did it on the backs of our families.
And that was noted earlier. The next step is, like it or not, the clock is ticking. I mean, the reason we put the 4 items on the agenda tonight the way we did was we were going to be acting on those things tonight. We were going to be introducing the ordinance, or saying we were going to introduce the ordinance next week. We were going to schedule a public hearing date, and we were going to formally make referrals to both the Planning Commission of the town and the Planning and Zoning Commission of the city. You're not doing that. We're not saying to do that tonight, but from a timing standpoint, that's what we were supposed to be doing tonight. So if there's any thought that we want to salvage 3 years worth of work, try to make some lemonade out of lemons, out of the bad news, and have some sense that this is doable. We need to make that decision in the next couple of weeks. Not necessarily tonight, but in the next couple of weeks. Because the train is rolling into the station and it's going to be rolling out of the station. Because as all of you know, our referendum process is arduous. There's a lot of steps. You've all gotten the calendar in the past. We have a little bit of flexibility, but this is not a decision that we can revisit in 2 months. It will be way too late then. And if the decision is not to go, I mean, if in the thought of, do we go ahead with a referendum with the $84 million, with these premises, and also knowing the council's always in a position to pull the project, even after the voters approve it. You have the authority. If the economic conditions of the community change, if the economic conditions of the state change, you do have that. We've never done that, but you do ultimately have that authority to do that. But ultimately the question is, if not this, what? And if not now, when? And that really gets back to Dean's observation that, we can't, I don't think we can just walk away from this. We would then have to come up with another plan, and at what cost, and at what time is our enemy. If we're worrying about a $30 million difference and it takes us another 3 years you know, will probably gobble up, you know, with inflation, 4 or 5% inflation on an annual basis. We haven't bought online. I was terrified to see the updated schedule talking about 2022 as to, you know, but that's the reality. It's almost like, not quite, but it's, sorry, Mark, it's almost like building a submarine. It takes a long time.
Thanks, Mark. So, I mean, I think that we need to figure some things out, as Mark said. And as Councilor Antipis pointed out, we do keep kicking the can down the road. I think, John, you said it when you first started this thing, that the thing that was approved, the referendum that went to voters before that was not approved, was substantially cheaper than the plan that we have now. And you know, one could argue that there was more than there is now. I think that you know, I don't know if anybody else feels. I feel a lot of anger. I mean, the whole thing, it just proves that nothing is easy in government. And if I had my druthers, I would have Dr. Grenier redistrict back to the way that it was, and have every school out of whack. And you know, I don't think that there's. I think you could probably argue that. I mean, you know, you've sent some people to schools, like someone else is saying. You could see the school out your window, and you were going to another school. Well, screw it. You know, I mean, put everyone back to the school that's closest to them. And October 1st, they'll all be out of balance, and we'll get 80% in every school.
Sir.
You know, I mean, I don't think that's unreasonable in my eyes, but reeling it back in, I think that we need to figure out how we're going to move forward and what the timelines are. That we probably could talk about it all night, and I mean, I think there's some people out there who are hoping we don't talk about it all night. And so, you know, I think that we need to at least walk away from here with what's going to happen. Or, you know, we have a 4-page plan. Can we? Is that enough to kind of regroup in 2 weeks when we have another COW meeting and do something with it, or, you know, do we need to have more written text and some more ideas about it, and go from there? Because it sounds to me like the council needs some more information, and some people are. Joe.
All right, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to, and if we do meet in a couple of weeks again, I just want to get this: is the percentage of minorities going down because it's a higher percentage going to New London schools? Is that because it seemed like we were well within it, and then is that part of it? Like, what's the percentage of the 400 kids going to London? How many minority? How many are not? Is it?
Fairly high percentage are minorities. That is true. And frankly, I think a good bit of that has to do with redistricting. Yeah. They didn't necessarily want to go to some other schools. Yeah, the one thing, I think not only we're angry, I think some of us are feeling exhausted. And if we go forward, I would just implore you, we have to figure out what we're going to do. We have to be together. Mm-hmm. You know, I will pledge every ounce of energy I have for this plan. If the town council wants to move forward with it, I am with you. It's about $136 per $100,000 of assessed evaluation, 136 on 100,000. That means the average homeowner to $200,000 assessed value home would be looking at what 172 or so, 170. 270, thank you. So is it worth $275? You know, what resonated with me this morning, I was really concerned. I spoke to Paul Chenier yesterday about the editorial he wrote today, and he ended with, things are not going well, and we're deteriorating. And the word deterioration is, in my mind, juxtaposed with investment. Are we going to make an investment in our community? And if we are, I will pledge, and I'm sure everyone around this table will pledge, we will do what is needed to put a plan together that's going to invigorate our schools. And we're trying to be practical. Having a new middle school would be a huge addition. Having 2 new magnet elementary schools would be terrific. But whatever we do, we have to go forward with enthusiasm. And I think it was Mark or someone said, if we just sort of let it out the gate and let the voters decide, I don't think. I think the voters need municipal leadership to say, this is the plan, as Councilor Antipas said, not getting any cheaper. There is no zero way to do it, and if we're going to move forward, then we need to move forward with our arms, really tightly locked. And if we need to back off and rethink the proverbial Plan B, then as far as I'm concerned, that would be better. That would be far better than a lukewarm, let the voters decide. That would be a death knell, I think.
So it's, John, did you want to say something?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say, I hear that we're angry. I don't think I'm angry. Again, if the commissioner had come out and said, hey, sorry, Representative Scott, thanks so much for trying, but 141 is just not palatable in this budget climate. I'm just going to have to, I'm not going to be able to approve this thing. I'm not going to be able to submit it. I think we would have said, oh, thanks so much. We really appreciate the effort. We understand. And we wouldn't have our feelings hurt. So, I'm not angry that she chose to do that. I can't control her actions. I can only control our actions, our reactions. And frankly, I just like to continue moving forward with a positive energy. If we can use it to motivate us, great. But as far as where that price point was, I think Councilor Morton was talking about, we'd always said over our 3.5-year journey that about $100 million was where we thought that we had to be under. We proved it with our survey to our respondents, and so coming in at $84 million now is still, of course, if we get $55 million, that's what we wanted to do. But I'm not too disappointed. I mean, I'm disappointed we didn't get that, but I'm not angry. I still think this is a good investment. On a percentage basis, we're still getting a higher percentage than we did on the original Phase 2. Phase 2 was a $133 million project that was going to cost Groton taxpayers $66 million, and this one is $184 million. It's only going to cost us $84 million. So we're getting a better percentage back on that. So if we can channel that anger and frustration and motivation, that's great. But I think for us to say we're going to take our marbles and go home, I just don't know how that's in our interest.
Thank you.
I just have one question. John, when are we going to find out how much they're going to take away from us, the grants for the schools?
We're supposed to have special session this week, maybe Friday. There's still a lot of things in the air. More information will be coming out in the next couple of days. They did release new budget figures for the latest proposal. So we'll have to see. I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as bad as what we first got hit with. I'm hoping it'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 250,000, but it's to be determined still.
Because I think it's interesting to point out that, yes, $250 a year raise isn't going to break anybody's bank, but let's be honest here. We have this going forward, along with the $6 million that we have cut down somewhat of the taxes. So that $250 is all of a sudden $750, $800, maybe $1,000 a year. Now we're talking a big chunk of change. So yeah, we'd like to get behind this, but I tell you what, I'm not feeling it right now. I'm really concerned.
I can't disagree with you, ma'am. We have a $19 trillion debt at the federal level and $1 billion debt at the state level. I mean, at some point we have to make up for that. But I couldn't agree more.
So, Kevin, just what you said is a quick, because we want to wrap this up.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor this, but I would still ask to let this thing move forward. Let the taxpayers decide on this. And I'm not going to say what your job is, but I mean, as a counselor, you care about the taxpayers, and it's also caring about the town. The town needs to move forward. You have economic plans coming forward, too. If we have better schools, then maybe we pick up our tax bases a lot higher, too, with economic development and other things and more people moving in and filling these schools. So it isn't just the school. It becomes the whole town. And I really, even if you don't like it, I would still ask you to let it go forward and let the taxpayers do that. Let planning come up what they're doing, and maybe this can be a town in a couple of years that it really shows promise and development instead of shooting everything down.
So we're going to move forward from here. So it sounds to me like obviously nothing's going to happen tonight. but I think we need to regroup in 2 weeks and have it on the agenda again, and,
We'll have more answers, too.
and have some answers. And Mark?
Yeah, I think, well, I think we have a couple of weeks. I haven't, I think if the council has some questions, or if anybody has some questions, if you could let us know. I really don't have questions. My thought is that we probably all need to think about, okay, what do we think this will be successful or not? But if there are questions that we need either our consultant or staff to kind of come up with some response to, I'd like to get those sooner as opposed to later. And I don't, if it's really more of, okay, and now that everybody kind of has the same baseline of information, has his best understanding of what happened in Hartford, and that, that brass ring has gone by us. And we need a little bit of time to kind of sort out our thoughts as to whether or not to move ahead. I don't know that we need to wait 2 weeks, but I don't know if there's another date.
Well, I mean, we only have 6 counselors here, so we're not going to do anything tonight without.
Well, I'm not suggesting tonight, but instead of waiting 2 weeks, is there another date beforehand? Maybe going to a Board of Ed meeting and continuing the discussion next Monday or the following Monday. That I understand. I'm not I'm not pushing for a decision tonight. It's just, as opposed to waiting 2 weeks, 2 weeks turns into 4 weeks, turns into 5 weeks for some action.
Yeah. But I think that if it's in the counselors, if the counselors agree, we can get together with the Board of Education and, if need be, I can, and hash it out, and everyone can come up with an opinion of how they feel about it, and we can see if it's a go, So if there's a meeting date that we can.
Monday, 16th of May. There's a finance committee meeting, and we can certainly put this on the agenda.
Are people available on the 16th? You're not.
Because our regular Board of Ed meeting is, we do a lot of recommendations, and so we're just to.
Can't do it on the 23rd.
Yeah, just.
Okay, well, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'm just trying to.
But absolutely, the 16th would be an option.
I can't be here.
This is, I just think this is I think it's critical. I mean, I want to,
Yeah, no,
I would like to push
disagree.
it forward. I think this is one of those times in history where we're voting on, everyone keeps talking about the budget this year. This is 60 years of schools. So we'll be long gone and the school will still be standing. So we got to remember that, even though it sounds like a huge amount of money, you take the 60 years and divide that, it's, what are we getting for it? And how much are we going to pay if we do zero? And we all know the answer to that. And my property value is lower because I have a neighbor that wants to sell his house because when he bought, his kid was walking to Gloucester. She walked to Gloucester the first year and she was done with that. So you're not gonna get a person to buy my house again next to me because their plan was to go to that neighborhood school. So that.
Yeah, but they're also talking about.
No, I know,
but they're talking about maybe closing some neighborhoods.
No, I know.
Too, so. I
get that, but that was part of the lore of that house. And maybe the fact that they've moved, I talked to one person that moved 5 schools in 6 years and then went to New London.
Yeah.
And said, at least I know I'll be at the Isaac School, and then at least I know I'll go to the high school. It's pretty traumatic for a kid to switch five times in 5 grades. I mean, I thought she was lying because it seemed like impossible, but it's what happened.
Well, it looks like we're trying to figure out the date. So I know, Councilor Barber, you can't make Monday.
I can't, I'm available.
But I think that, we don't know about 3 councils who aren't here. The 17th is not good for you guys. The 18th is a Wednesday. The 17th, negotiations. The 18th is Wednesday.
17th is negotiation.
Right.
The 18th is a Wednesday night.
The 18th, maybe we have a few, not great.
Come again?
We had that AGA, GEA.
Well, we can come afterwards.
Yeah.
What time is that at?
Well, it actually starts at like 4:30. We
Yeah.
can certainly meet at
You available?
6:30 or.
Okay. So why don't we?
Par 4.
18.
Par 4?
They're meeting at Par
So
4.
why don't we plan on the 18th at
Alright.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock on the
Here.
18th?
You won't be here?
RTM budget.
You knew that off the
But
top of
that's
your
fine,
head.
that's fine.
Well, yeah, but Mark's important.
5:30. Is 6 okay?
The
What time is your?
budget's at 7, so
Okay,
5:30.
Yeah, but
5:30.
Kim, we have that meeting typically at a restaurant.
I don't know if I could be there then, right?
5:30?
Yeah, I can't make the 18th.
Mark, what if we hold it
Well-
at the senior center at 6?
I am or not.
It's
In one of the
it's not
rooms.
great. 18th.
You can have an hour.
They're meeting at Par 4, that's a truck.
Okay, so why don't we try for 6? At the senior center, in a side room, and Mark will be able to,
Sorry?
Wednesday, the 18th at 6 at the senior center.
We could do that.
okay?
I
Does that sound
can't
good?
make it that night, but, you know, not everyone's gonna be able to match up.
So Nikki, we'll
What do you got, Joe?
You kinda know where to fall anyway.
No.
Just put it to the voters,
You want
maybe.
us to post it too? That's the way it
I
goes?
can post it, it's
All right,
fine.
so Nikki will post 6 o'clock on the 18th of May.
And Mark, that's okay with you, the senior center, you'll be able to,
I'll be right there.
okay?
I touched on this before. I think this is often lost. I think people watching the process take it as a given that some folks get together and do stuff, and something happens, it doesn't happen, they approve, they don't approve. And it is not a given. It is not a given that enough dedicated people with brains and some common sense actually get together and stick to something as long as these people have to, no matter what you think of the ultimate product, whether you like the idea of the single middle school, don't like it, whatever, there is no denying, this is not a given. What John and his group have done is professional grade. They've provided us with a ton of information, there's a lot to digest, we admit that. It did not have to be that way. It could very easily have been a different community and a whole clown car kind of a process. It's been handled very, very well. I have my hats off to you, all my hats.
On behalf of the whole team, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again.
I'll do the other clown.
'It's true. I can imagine the towns mentally incapable of running through any of this. And nobody has to volunteer to think about it. You say, well, let's do it again some other time. Who's going to volunteer for this stuff? I think we're all tired.
I just don't know how you explain it.
I don't know why I'm sitting here. What was I thinking?
Well, you can write the text now, it's the number that you're putting the explanatory text with.
What's that mean?
Hot mics.
I mean, the price isn't gonna change.
No, but if their tax bill.
Right, but we can drop it at any time.
Well, I just don't know how, keep not going to vote on something, what their tax.
We're gonna keep this meeting going. Sorry, everybody who's exiting, but.
$9:00.
So the next item on the agenda is State Department of Transportation I-95 signage initiative. And so we'll welcome John and Paige to the dais, or whatever it is, the table.
It's not a you.
And not a you, it's a no. And so the, I believe that it came about at a either Groton Business Association meeting or Mystic Chamber or the Mystic Merchants had caught wind that the sign program is being looked at by the state, and that there was a council resolution that was passed, I think, in 1988 or 1989, that requested that no signage be placed on I-95 at exit 89. And it had to do with, it came from the neighbors, it came from a bunch of different places. And you guys are here tonight representing everybody from the town perspective. Well, I should say, everybody on the business side. The Groton Business Association is here, the Mystic Merchants are here, the Mystic Chamber is here, all represented, all care a great deal about this. I know that all the counselors have received numerous emails, both pro and con, regarding this issue. It's quite quite a hot button issue. So why don't you guys give a little background, and then I know Councilor Barber wants to read something from Councilor Nault, and then we'll go from there.
Great, thank you very much. So first, staff, we're looking at this, and we are requesting the council to approve allowing signage referencing Mystic at exit 89 on 195. As you stated, this has been going on for a little while. It's something that the towns had been reached out to by DOT just a couple of months ago, looking at a sign plan from the Gold Star Bridge to the Rhode Island line. We, the town, have been working with the COG and the surrounding municipalities to get a handle on this. And the Allen Street issue came up at a meeting just a couple of weeks ago, that this is something that can be addressed now. Without such an approval, Connecticut DOT will only sign and reference Mystic only through exit 90 at Stonington, and this includes the newly proposed attraction panel sign, so showing what is actually there. So, as I said, DOT approached Groton, said they were doing this project. The goal of the project overall is to replace all signage and supports due to the age, the loss of reflectivity, new designs, and federal location requirements. Something that we also have to keep in mind is that I-95 is signage designated for interstate travelers, not necessarily our everyday folks that are just doing our local driving needs. We know the local roads. This sign replacement project is a $9 million capital investment at 100% state funding. The state schedule looks to have all the signs improved and installed by early 2017. As I said, town staff have been reviewing plans and comments over the past few weeks, and the deadline for getting comments to Connecticut DOT is May 20th. They've set a very hard date with that. That date we just learned very recently. While staff is addressing the other sign comments for other exits within town, exit 89 signage matter requires council action. Without council action, DOT will maintain the status quo position based on our previous decision, that previous referendum, that resolution from 1989, prevented reference to Mystic at the exit, despite this being a viable route to downtown Mystic for many Route 95 travelers.
I think it's important to realize that the roadways we're dealing with are both federal and state roadways. That includes I-95, it also includes State Route 614, also known as Allen Street, and it leads to State Route 1. There's no local ownership or maintenance of those roads. They're all state assets. These roadways were designed, the federal and also state roadways, were designed and constructed for volumes of traffic that are much higher than local traffic alone. Due to council's support over the past year especially, we've really ramped up our economic development efforts, and I think we're making more progress in moving forward. And that's taken a lot of significant financial time and resources, and there'll be more moving forward. The market analysis, which you know was recently completed, it actually gives some very specific recommendations for implementation. And that was a basis for much of our budget request as well. And that includes marketing, promotion, a dedicated economic development website, and also community signage, more at the local level. But it's important to know we have that local community signage project that we've targeted that actually kind of marries with this I-95 signage project as well. Exit 89 Mystic signage would provide an immediate benefit to Mystic and also the businesses that are located there. And that would be without the use of any local funding. So as I just alluded to, we are allocating local funding for economic development, but this project would require no local funding. It's simply a decision that we would support this initiative at this location. We've mentioned in the past that Groton has been quite fortunate in growing with larger company growth, and that in the future we anticipate the largest growth will come from
basically the sum of small and medium-sized businesses. And that's exactly what you're seeing in Mystic. Mystic is a hotbed of growing businesses. There were concerns a few months ago over the winter that we had some vacancies. Moving into the summer, we're looking quite good. And Mystic is a village, a community that other locations would love to try to mimic and create. It's not an easy thing to do, and we have it here. And I think what we're tasked in doing is trying to grow it and foster its success. Although some residents are concerned about using the word or the name Mystic at exit 89, there are a large number of individuals and businesses and organizations that do indeed support adding the word Mystic at that location. They recognize its benefit, and some are here this evening. We would envision this I-95 signage project to basically be something close to a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It probably won't happen again for another 30-plus years. And we believe that it should be supported and that it would actually complement our local efforts as well to improve our image, our brand, and local signage.
Thank you, Paige. Councilors, actually, Barbara?
Councilor Knoll could not be here, so she sent me an email and asked me to read it. Said, thank you to the many of you that have contacted me to support or oppose this proposal from DOT that will be improving signs all along Route 95, which will improve the lives of tourists and those who are coming here to spend their hard-earned dollars in hopefully our town. Never before have we had the need to grow the grand list, fill empty stores, and encourage visitors to both exit 89 and exit 90 while visiting our historic and beautiful town. This will help our businesses and will be paid for by the state. I also live right downtown on Pearl Street. Like many of you who are protesting this, I am impacted when the bridge is up, but that is also what makes our town unique. I am also very tired of the empty storefronts in the burned-out central block. There are many supporters at the public budget hearing to endorse the Economic Development Department's plan and budget to grow the grand list and get rid of empty schools. The Economic Development Department came to me because of my liaison seat on the Economic Development Commission, wanting us to support this signage on Route 95 for exit 89 to Allen Street. The Groton Business Association and Downtown Mystic Merchants also came to me for support because I am a member of these associations. I am a member because I strongly believe in economic growth and feel that that will be our only way to keep our storefronts filled, our taxes down, and keep folks living in our town. I strongly support this plan to get businesses in the town and the city of Groton. We need this. From a traffic and safety management plan, 2 main arteries versus 1 to help let tourists into town is important. Instead of completely bottlenecking Route 27 in the summer, there was a tremendous outpouring of support at the public hearing on the budget supporting Economic Development Department's plans to grow our businesses by streamlining and rewriting the zoning regulations. We completely supported them. Okay, and that's pretty much it.
All right, thank you. Councilors?
Can I just put my 2 cents in?
Absolutely.
Okay. I am glad that you brought up that Allen Street is a state road because that was probably my biggest fight about this. It's a state road and it dumps into Route 1 that is also another state road. I happen to be a traveler and I like that there are signs to tell me where I'm going when I do travel. And my opinion is Route 95 from Maine down to Florida, there should be one of those signs at every single exit. That's my opinion. I would also like to see and ask you if you're looking into exit 88 also, maybe put Bluff Point on there or something else and put some of our other unique things that we have to offer. Has that been in the
Yes, we're looking at all of the exits within the town of Groton, within this, and also that dump out onto the city of Groton, so we're working with them. We will be talking and identifying things like Bluff Point and our other great resources in town. The one that we're focusing on here tonight, again, is Allen Street, just because of that old town council resolution. Without you rescinding that, we can't do anything.
Gotcha.
Councilor Morton and Councilor Antibus? Then Councilor Grimm, and then Joe.
Yes, I just wanted to say, I live in Mystic as well, and I totally support a change in the signing. I think we've done an injustice to all of the businesses that are located in Mystic, because there are just so many great businesses that are down there that people have no idea that even exist. They all get off in on the Stonington side of the river, and they never venture up. And I'm very skeptical that there's going to be a massive increase in the amount of traffic, because my husband and I do a lot of traveling. We love going everywhere we go. If possible, we always go by car. We use the GPS, and the GPS will direct you the most direct route. So anybody coming into our area from out of town who doesn't know Mystic is probably going to get off at exit 89, even though there's no sign there because the GPS tells them to. So I don't necessarily think that it's going to result in a huge influx of traffic just for out-of-town visitors.
Councilor Davis?
Thank you. Someone's going to be ticked tonight. There's no way to avoid that. Don't kid yourselves. You're going to be ticking somebody off. So here's my 2, 3, 4, 5 cents.
You will be too, won't you?
We'll get to it.
All right.
All right. I'll start with this. I'm a little concerned about how we got here. I might have missed something. It happens a lot. But I first heard about this when I got a couple of emails on Thursday afternoon. I said, look at this. The GBA is saying that something's going to be on our agenda on Tuesday. And sure enough, in Saturday's package, there it is. And I saw in GBA's email, which is very informative, that the merchants better get out there and talk to us before the residents get a hold of us, because the residents are going to be out in force. I want to know, especially since it kind of looks, I don't know, that like the planning memo, the documents that are in here look like it looks like everybody's been on board with this, knows that this is on the agenda, except for the residents. Now, obviously, some residents have heard about it, thank goodness for a grapevine. But I find it interesting that the other people, the other population that's going to be affected by this, wasn't part of the coordination process. And I know why, because the expectation would be that they'll say what their forebears said back in the 70s when Allen Street, then the Allen Street extension was first proposed, would say the same thing, not in my backyard. I got that one. This is an ancient kind of a struggle. But it would have been nice if there was something other than a very casual, well, maybe the residents will hear about it. Because let's face it, the proponents of the plan don't want to hear from the residents. They say they want to hear from the residents. No, they don't. Because what they want is they want this. This is supposed to be a good thing. And if you remove the residents from the picture, of course, it's a beautiful thing. It's a no-brainer. It is not a no-brainer. A disclosure, I live on Payer Lane. That feeds right into Allen Street. But I'm not the only one. I could recuse myself and say, well, this affects me personally. Yeah, it does, but there are also over 100, just the abutting property owners. You're looking at over 100 residential properties that are affected by that, not counting, down the stream, down Edgecombe and places like that, and Library. So it isn't just me. When Allen Street went in the 70s, yeah, there was an attempt. There was an impromptu. It was called Trees, and they tried to stop it. And it was all part of the environmental movement and all that. Got that one. What people remember from that was that, and I saw it expressed in a couple of emails, there's sort of an expectation that the resistance would drop if there was this concession. And a couple of the concessions were this. One, there wouldn't be a lot of development on Allen Street. So there are properties that front Allen Street that are not allowed to have frontage on Allen Street. There were some exceptions. But the other major one that people remember, that they carry in their memories, is no sign on 95 that tells you this is the way you get to downtown Mystic. So put your road in, but don't sign it. Okay, that was part of whether that's true or not, whether it was truly a legal concession between the Trees group and the state, I don't know. But this is how people remember it. So they see this and they say, aha, somebody's reneging. So there's that colors this. Apart from that, It's been said, well, you're not gonna have a lot of extra traffic because people go there with their GPS anyway. Well, okay, if that's true, but I've got nothing to worry about, my neighbors have got nothing to worry about, I can still make left turns when I can make left turns, I don't need a traffic light, my kids aren't gonna get hit. But the presumption is that the signage will increase traffic, so I'll go with that. I'll go with that. So we've all gotten the emails and we've heard about, well, noise, okay. Accidents, got them. I don't know that that's not gonna stop. I mean, Allen Street is a busy road. And yes, it is kind of a highway. I mean, I would liken it to some degree to the Hammonasset connector. When you get off 95, there really isn't much once you go past Sandy Hollow. It looks like a little highway until you get to the old part of Allen Street, where they tell you to step down to 25. And you know why the cops sit there? Because people don't do 25. They weren't doing 45 to begin with. That's why you can hand out tickets all the livelong day. Because the first time people say, holy crap, I'm in a residential neighborhood, is when they hit that little stoplight. And some people have said, sometimes they don't even stop. People and we don't have sidewalks for a long length of Allen Street. There's no way to cross unless you go all the way down. And you've got to walk along Allen Street. It's not like 27. Traffic is controlled on 27 because there are attractions, there are stops, there is traffic. People get off 95, they will zoom down Allen Street until they hit something, a stop sign, a light, and hopefully not my kid. As it is, we've got families on either side. I'll allow my 15-year-old to cross, but I will not allow my 12-year-old to cross. My 15-year-old can cross because there are gaps. Even in the summer, you can find a gap where there isn't a car coming this way, there isn't a car coming that way. If there's increased traffic, as the merchants expect, that's an if, there won't be a gap. We will be cut off, the residents will be cut off. It'll be like we joke at the Cape, you just don't make a left onto Route 28 or Route 6A, you know, in the summertime. You just don't do that. That's what Allen Street's gonna turn into. They're gonna have to put a light in, of course it'll be state funded, have to put a light in, that intersection, which is already a little messy, but people can tolerate it, where you've got the 95 interchange and Sandy Hollow Road. If increased traffic comes in, you'll definitely have to see a light there. But here's another thing I don't see addressed anywhere in the documents that we've been given. People coming in are gonna say, I'm not gonna wait. I mean, I don't wait till I get to downtown Provincetown to find parking. I'm gonna try to find parking before I get to the mess. People will be heading down Allen Street. Again, this is presuming additional traffic. And they'll say, well, I'm not gonna wait till I get to downtown. That's gonna be a mess. They may even see it back up. They'll go find parking someplace else. People will park on this, they'll park on the residential streets. I don't think there are any signs that say no parking. Right now, apart from parade days, like Memorial Day or St. Patrick's Day, where you do see cars parked even up till Allen Street, I think if the increased traffic comes through, you will see people parking in neighborhoods, driving through neighborhoods, looking to avoid the tie-up that you're gonna get at that light with Allen Street and Route 1. People will make that left turn, they're making them anyway. They'll go down Edgecombe and so on. It's going to be a mess, and I don't see this addressed anywhere. And I feel a little harried that I've got to think about this, that we have to think about this right now, or else it'll be 30 years. Holy smokes, how many times do we have things like this to work, this kind of a timing to think about? Like I said, it may be a no-brainer for some other people. And I can say, well, yeah, you say what you're saying because you live there. It isn't just me. Read some of the emails. Nobody from my neighborhood has written in. You know why? Because I haven't gone out and solicited anything. I could have. They don't know. And if they knew, you'd get another pile of emails from those people. I think they have to count for something. To me, as I sit with incomplete information, the history, the complaints, the pros and the cons, is it an experiment? Let's see what happens. Can you take the sign down afterwards? I don't know. So the merchants may get an increase. I don't think that's why the fire block, the so-called fire block, isn't being built. I don't think that's why we have a couple of empty storefronts downtown. But that's not me. I drive through there all the time. It's a pain. I live there. I know. So that's on the one hand. You've got a potential benefit for the merchants versus a certain negative experience for the people that actually live there. And so where I sit right now, I've got to come down against this thing.
Thank you. Councilor Grimm?
Thanks. Just a couple of questions. I'm a little confused why the council even has jurisdiction over controlling the signs on 95. I mean, I don't know the history of how that resolution got passed, but it doesn't even seem like it'd be a legal thing for us to be voting on. You know.
They want us to be the bad guy.
Yeah, it's an interstate which dumps off onto a state highway. You know, how do we fit in the picture?
State agencies usually like to look to the host municipality and help them along or hear their preference. I mean, this certainly predated my time working for the town. I think I was in elementary school, but maybe middle school.
These issues
but still,
that come
it's something that right now DOT has said in no uncertain terms. We will not change anything until the council rescinds that old resolution, which I'm not even sure if a resolution from 1989 is still even valid with your current council, because that was a policy of an older council. But I mean, that's your own rules.
Well, Mark?
Well, let me, I wasn't here in
Try to
1989,
yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think you raise a very good point. Even earlier this year on a sister signage project, I got a call from DOT asking, was I okay for it? And the guy basically, I took him through the history as this is on the little sign that was put up, directional sign for the Art Association. And I just was trying to give him a heads up. He was probably even younger than John. He had no background. And ultimately, he was looking for me to sign off. I wouldn't sign off because of that reason. It's a state initiative. And oh, by the way, I found out they couldn't say no anyway. So why were they even bothering to call me? But that's a different issue, and some of the emails that you have in your packet references that. But I think the underlying issue here is when Allen Street was in the planning stages, and I wasn't here, but the legacy and the comments that people have expressed to me over the years when I first started working for the town is there was some agreement, understanding. I've never seen it in writing, but in order to get the street built, there appears to have been what people perceive to either be promises or an understanding or whatever, that Allen Street would not say downtown Mystic. Now, of course, when Allen Street was planned and when it was built, downtown Mystic isn't the downtown Mystic as we know now. But there seemed to be at least this urban legacy, but I think it was more than that. I truly do think there was some understanding. So something moving forward to 1989, something must have been going on in 1989. And DOT either approached the town or the town approached DOT and passed a resolution. This is a state road. Normally the state does. I haven't had exactly the same experience as John has had with DOTs. They basically do what they want. But this is a lightning rod issue. There's no doubt about it. This simply got to address maybe in part some of Dean's concerns or observations. This was not on the agenda until Friday of last week, Dean. There was an EDC meeting in which a counselor, I don't know that she tracked me down, but she came over to the RTM meeting Thursday night wanting this item added to the agenda. I simply asked her, have you talked to the mayor? Please talk to the mayor. We had an exchange of emails through half the evening. Came in on my day off to get the agenda revamped on Friday. So it's certainly from a town staff standpoint, I don't know what email you got from the GBA or whatever. I certainly.
Oh, it said everybody be here tonight,
I'm
even
not
though
sure
I-
I've seen
there was
that
a
yet, but
misunderstanding about
I
the
certainly
procedure
did not get it Thursday. It was simply a request from a counselor to add something to the agenda.
Well, it
but-
remains my point, that GBA knew this was gonna be on the agenda before I did.
They may have been at the EDC meeting. I
Right.
don't know.
I mean,
what.
I know that's where that started.
But anyways, this is great point, but I think the fact that the state has honored the town's request that was issued in 1989, which in my opinion is still in force. It'd be pure chaos if every 2 years, every action that a council took dissipated. So I believe they look at it as still is the desire of the town unless we tell them otherwise. And I think it's a fair request. But this is purely a policy decision. I can't even tell you what the issue was in 1989. I truly don't know. Booming economy, there may have been a lot of stuff going on in downtown Mystic, and it's come up many times since then, many times over the years. Certain business interests and others have wanted signage. And the council, I think, has considered some of them in the past and decided not to change.
Right, but I think it's more than a policy issue, because we're talking about traffic and safety, and we want an answer by May 20th. So has there been any studies or discussion to that effect?
No, there have been no studies by DOT. They are looking at this purely from a policy issue. That's the direction we've gotten of, do you want it to be signed or do you not want it to be signed? Again, we haven't done a traffic study. If it's something that warrants one, that's something we can request of DOT. I try not to make assumptions on things. They're state roads. They were built to a certain standard. I don't know the roadway capacity of the traffic of Allen Street and that off-ramp, but I'd make a judgment that it's higher than what it is being utilized at right now.
And this is only one sign we're talking about? I mean, the rest of the redesign can go forward? Is it just the exit 89 sign that's not going to say Allen Street, it's going to say Mystic now?
Well, that's up to you. So it's the exit 89, both going south and going north. DOT is looking for direction from us.
So you're just coming to us for that particular sign?
Correct.
None of the other signs?
Correct. I mean, if you want to have input on it, feel free to.
You have all the maps
Right.
as part of your packet. It does get a little confusing looking at them, but if you spend enough time looking, I think you can figure out what's existing versus what's proposed. There's a few instances where there's some different alternatives being provided. Certainly if the council, we're at staff level, we're simply trying to take advantage of this opportunity that is presenting itself, because like it or not, this is probably, whatever we end up with is probably a 30-year life. Many of the signs on I-95 and 395 are in terrible shape. You can barely read them at night. So this is a tremendous opportunity, but change is tough. There's no doubt about it. I think though, certainly if any of you have any suggestions for any of the signs, there are some kind of new rules, or at least new to me, desires that DOT has. They don't, on the one hand, they seem to be saying they want to direct, no matter if you're going north or south, they want to direct everybody to the same exit. And for example, if you're coming from New London, if you want to get off at downtown Groton, you take the exit right after the bridge. But if you're coming from Providence and you want downtown Groton, you're taking Route 117. They seem, and I haven't really had a chance to talk much with John and Paige, but they seem to be saying they want to put everything at one exit. But here we are talking about Mystic, and it's all at one exit now, exit 90. But they seem to be receptive to changing it if that's the desire of the council. So it's been a learning curve. I've never been through a project like this before. DOT staff has been great. They initially sent out letters and just thought we were all just going to blindly sign on the bottom line without any explanation or without any community discussion. And we've scrambled to put a couple of those, or to make ourselves available for those meetings and ask for them. And we've really got two universes we're working in, the Mystic universe, and working with Stonington and all the attractions on that side of the town. And then the City of Groton, New London universe, maybe Waterford a little bit too. So there's been a couple sets of meetings been going on over the last couple of weeks to try to be responsive to DOT.
Councilor De La Cruz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got a few things. I think they could change the signage on the highway where, to me, the worst economic hurdle that we have to cross is that all the accidents at the same exact spot on 95 that they never resolved, which creates chaos in my neighborhood and Allen Street neighborhood. But it's where it goes from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. Hopefully they correct that and give like better warning ahead of time, because that is, and I don't know if you've lived through it. I know you've been here recently, but it's an accident, maybe 2 or 3 a year that just stops Groton altogether. As far as the 89 goes, I compare it to the casinos. I mean, if you're coming down 395 from Massachusetts, it says the best way to Foxwoods is to go Route 32 to 95 to exit 90. That's really not the best way. We all know that. And I don't want to scare the residents saying you're not going to have casino traffic. I mean, they don't have a stadium down in Mystic. There's not a big baseball stadium where it's going to be that kind of traffic, but it probably will be more steady. But it's not like there's big events going on at the same time other than the parade, and everybody knows that route also. But I would even add to, as far as suggestions go, I've been saying this for a while. I was thinking about the high school all the time as a place to bring people to Mystic. But the exit 88 has a park and ride. We have senior buses that don't operate on Saturday and Sunday for the most part, or we at least have a spare one. We could have one person drive a bus from Memorial Day to Labor Day. Exit 88 would say park and ride, free bus, just like we do in Newport. It's usually $2 in Newport, but we're a smaller community, maybe we can do it for free for now. But you'd park cars in that park and ride, and people would just bring the bus down to downtown Mystic, and maybe it would go from the park and ride to the Heritage Park, and then back to the park, back and forth, which we already own the bus.
How about the trolley?
Yeah, the trolley, so that bus is owned already, air conditioned, good to go. That's something I would love to see. Exit 88 park and ride, May, Labor Day. And I really think that would help, because if people think they can park and they don't have to find their way to Mystic, then it'll help the bus driver, because you know how to get downtown with that sign up. I think it'd be good. So I'm not against it. I know, I still don't like the way the state operates. This is last minute, and we have to make the decision now, and we don't get to make it again for 30 years. It seems that's the way they operate everything, so we have to live within their parameters. But to make a quick decision, I would say put the sign up, and especially we're getting direction from our planning department that really, I would say, has been a huge bright spot in the town, because that's all we hear is how great you guys are doing, and I appreciate it. But I'm for it. I'm not going to talk forever about it, but if they can do that exit 88 thing, and the Bluff Point sign is going to make my neighborhood clogged up too. I mean, it is what it is. I don't think there's a great signage for it now, but if they increase that signage and it says, hey, this is the exit, I live on 117, well, right off of it. And I understand, but we are in different times, and we want people to come to our town and kind of spend their money here, so I'm all for it.
Thank you. I have a couple of points here I'd like to make, but it seems to me that there's a lot of people who never find downtown Mystic, especially if they get off at exit 90. I've been told a number of times that people end up stopping at Old Mystic Village and thinking that's Mystic, and never know we have a bridge, and never know that there are shop owners downtown. Right. So from that standpoint, I think that the downtown merchants deserve their due. To Dean, to your point about the neighborhood, we've seen it a couple of times in the last couple of years. We saw it with William Seeley School. The neighbors who live by William Seeley are concerned about what's going to happen to the school. And this council voted to sell that property and have it developed I'm not using these words, but at the expense of the neighborhood. We looked at it at Knowing School. The only reason, really, in my eyes, that Knowing School didn't get developed was because they have their own zoning. And so, if I've received a number of letters from the people who live along, Allen Street and West Mystic, and some of their points are valid, especially they become more valid the closer you live to the area that's going to be affected. I also happened to be in a meeting this morning with Mark and asked the chief of police, just off the cuff, what he thought about adding the signage to exit 89 and what it would do to traffic. And he said, that was very interesting. He said he thinks the signage should be there. And he also said that he thought that the increased traffic would actually slow down the road and make it a little bit safer, because people wouldn't have the ability to speed through. There would be traffic in front of them and behind them, and so it would slow them down. My thoughts are that I think we should put the signage there, but I think we should be respectful to the neighborhoods and see what we can do to ease the pain. So as examples, I don't know how the DOT operates, but I would send the letter that we want to lift the restriction, but talk to them about how we move forward. Like if we have to give the restriction lifting by May 20th, then send a letter saying we're going to lift the restriction. But then have discussions and figure out, how we're going to move forward with it. I think that we should be able to direct people to parking. So if people are going to get off at 89, it needs to be clearly signed where they go straight, take a left on Route 1, take a right on 215 or whatever, whatever the street is, and park into the parking there. We also need to make sure that there's enough spaces in the parking lot to accommodate what could be additional parking. And if there are, from the museum's side, if there are people who are, I don't know, maybe a bunch of employees parking there, I would say that we have to have some kind of program where the employees can't park in that lot, especially if we're going to be increasing the amount of cars that are going to be parking down there. Because the last thing we want is for a car to pull into downtown Mystic and not know where to go and end up going to the next exit and heading out because they couldn't find parking. I think also that I received a call from Mike Spellman, selectman in Stonington. And, it's gotten their attention too because the cars get off at 27 and there's a number of businesses along that route that are the benefit of that traffic and they don't want to lose that traffic. Maybe there's ways to, I think one of the things I read about in the letter from the DOT was, it said that there'd be additional signage for the aquarium in the seaport prior to exit 89, so people knew not to get off at 89 for the seaport and the aquarium, and they know to go to the next exit. So I think a lot of it's communication. I think there's a lot of benefits for putting the signage up, and I would support it, but I would support it looking at the respect of the neighbors and trying to figure out the best way. Because, I mean, the streets leading there have sidewalks. I think one issue that's been brought up to us before is the crossing at Route 1, how you can only cross the street, I'm going to say the Groton side of the intersection. On Route 1 going towards Mystic, there's no crosswalk there. There's only 2 ways to cross out of the 4 places to cross. So I think we should look at increasing the crosswalks there if the traffic's going to be increased. But I think these are all talk for later. I think the bottom line is to try to get that waiver lifted and then figure out what's the best way to accommodate everybody. So I would support it too. Councilor Morton and Councilor Martinez.
Well, I think maybe the first step is then I'd like to make a motion that we rescind the whatever resolution was filed by the town or approved by the town council with regard to Allen Street.
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second to rescind the motion. Is there further discussion on this? Councilor Martinez.
Well, you referenced, Mayor, the 2 schools, Noank and William Seeley. And I think we acknowledged, especially in the case of William Seeley, that unlike in the case of the Noank school, there was no reuse task force or anything like that. That could have been handled, frankly, better. Whether the residents would have been happy in the end with the decision or not is another question. But I think we recognized there was a flaw in the process and not first seeking their input. This is precisely the problem that I have here. I'm not saying that if everybody had been given notice ahead of time, and as a public information and so on and so forth, and we had the luxury of time, that the residents would walk away satisfied that everything was going to go just A-okay. But I think they don't appreciate, in fact, there are people sitting at home tonight, no TV on, don't know this is going on. I haven't gone out and told anybody because I didn't think it was proper.
Sorry, I did go out because we heard a number of people who wrote us about the museum signs. And those people, I did let them know, out of respect for them, that it was being discussed, and that we've received letters from them.
Okay.
So it's not a complete dark, it's not complete darkness on this.
Oh, all right. Unlike in those situations, the only people who are gonna bear the cost of this are the residents. There's no cost to the town, as you've ably pointed out. Everything's gonna be great until you're one of those people that winds up never being able to make a left turn. You're one of those people that, I mean, we will be, on our side, we will be cut off from the rest of Mystic. It'll be a highway. If what they want goes through, which is increased traffic, it'll be a highway. And it won't be Route 27. It'll be a highway. It'll be the Hammonasset connector. So I'm gonna continue to vote no on this thing. I'm very mindful of the needs of the businesses, but somebody has to say something on behalf of the residents who don't want this. I happen to be among them, but I'd be saying it anyway because nobody else is apparently.
Thank you. Councilor De La Cruz?
Just quickly, I want to say, I feel like the residents should kind of have a say, but we are faced with a decision by the state telling us by May 20th, it's a up or a down. I hate the idea of it, but my gut tells me that this is the right thing to do for the businesses downtown, and I don't think it's going to be the highway that you're anticipating. I think most people that are going to the Mystic Aquarium are going to Mystic Aquarium, but I think if someone sees the drawbridge and they happen to just be joyriding, they're gonna get off and say, oh, drawbridge. Mystic Aquarium doesn't mean anything to me. I don't have kids in the car. I'd like to see a drawbridge. And that may bring someone down to that area that may have never, ever been down there. So I mean, again, I'm not an expert and I could be completely wrong and it's gonna turn into something crazy, but I don't see that. I think most people go to Mystic Seaport. Most people go to, because it is all the parking's there. But I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I think they have to, when you get off, they're gonna have to give signage to the big parking lot, because they may just drive over the drawbridge and go, oh, that was cool, and just keep on driving. So hopefully we get that signage correct, but that would probably be on us and then not the state, but that's just small signage, so I'm definitely, it is tough, but I understand where you're coming from. We're faced with a decision of now or never, and probably shouldn't be the way it is, but that's what the hearing's about.
Yeah, and I'm mindful of the residents also, and I did get some emails, although I got more emails from people saying, please do it. There's things that we can revisit, right? The blinking light, if necessary, we can ask the state to make it a traffic light. Necessary, we can put up another one. I mean, there's options we can do to make sure that the residents are safe, because the kids and the residents do have to be safe.
Thank you. Councilor Quinn?
Do we have the language of what we're rescinding anywhere?
We do not yet. It's not in the packet. There's no.
You have the copy of the 1989.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
What page?
Okay.
Oh, 1989 was the year I graduated. A lot of strange stuff happened that year.
They never should have let it happen, Joe.
They let me.
What grade?
What?
What grade?
Oh, middle school.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm kidding. High school.
So there's, when you find attachment 8, it starts on the first page that you see attachment 8, but it got revised. So the actual one that formally got acted on is on the back of that. It says page 12 of those council minutes from May 16th, 1989.
So I think the motion, Councilor Grimm, was to rescind this.
Right.
Yeah.
The particular,
Yeah. Mark, will that be adequate if we, or John, would that, if we rescind the resolution from 1989, is that?
I would suggest that we try to also address some of the other things that you would like to see happen as follow-up items.
Okay.
So that we, sometimes when resolutions are rescinded, it's simply, whereas on May 16th, 1989, the then council passed a, we hereby rescind. I took it that there were some other things that yet to maybe be fully defined, but with conditions, other signage, looking at Route 1 and Allen Street from a pedestrian standpoint, that intersection from a pedestrian standpoint, the blinking light at Library Street.
Councilor Antino?
Yeah, there should be a sign telling people that they're gonna be sitting in traffic at the bridge. Let them know that on I-95. It's the honest thing to do.
It's gonna be one long written sign.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking at this old, what we're rescinding. what they asked, that council had come up with was, they didn't want to do it because it would maybe substantially increase traffic and possibly cause confusion. So there were two reasons. The second reason, it could cause confusion for motorists heading to Mystic Seaport or Marine Aquarium. And I think that's going to be resolved by a larger sign in front of it now. Or them
It's gonna be
saying,
addressed, yeah.
that's getting addressed with another sign before that exit, so people aren't like making that mistake and getting off at the wrong exit,
Mhm.
so.
So can we figure out the whereases at a later time and just vote them?
We'll have a draft on your agenda for next week for you to
Okay.
consider. I have
So
no
we
doubt.
want to vote now on
Yes.
giving the ability to draft that. So all those in favor of drafting the resolution that will rescind and put forth what we want done with regards to the signage, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 5-1 to 0. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for everybody who came out.
Don't forget our exit 88 sign. Oh, that was everything.
Now we're all on.
That's it. Back to a regular council meeting.
Oh, I'm getting a headache.
No one here.
Back, the next item on the agenda is for Jen's court update.
And nothing will clear a room like a public works.
It's you, Gary.
Down at the treatment plant earlier.
I do believe the council has questions on the project. I know I'm gonna grab my phone. For the closure of Virginia's Court. What I'm passing around is two sketches that we have.
Different hearing.
There should be one that shows.
This is a different one?
No, it's one showing the original.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold it.
Is it? Hold on.
No, they're together.
Oh, they are? So it's the same one?
It's the same.
There you go. Is it?
Okay, so
Well, we need one more down here.
One more down there? There you go. Is it? Yeah.
Everything looks red to me right now, anyway.
just real quickly, if the microphone's on, in 2005, funds were appropriated to conceptual design to eliminate.
Yeah, we didn't need it, Mark came over and gave it to me.
And that was done. We did a traffic study that was done, and in FYE 14, funds were approved by both the council and the RTM to design, permit, and to construct to dead-end Virginia's Court to Route 1. The plans that you have, or the plan here, Route 1, Gloucester School is up over here, the shopping center's across the street. There is Virginia's Court. What we are proposing to do is within the existing right-of-way that we have, which is shown on your plans, on these plans as a red line, is to create the cul-de-sac in this location by extending the sidewalk straight across, taking the asphalt pavement out, putting a proper crosswalk into a nice opening over here across the street, thus removing it there, but still providing access, emergency access, if the other two access points into the Fort Hill area were ever blocked and police and fire needed to get in. So this will still provide a barrier for regular car traffic. Now, the traffic study in 2005 that was done on one day, but at three separate times during the day, morning, afternoon, and night, showed traffic counts leaving the court. They were going, if you're leaving the court, you're making a left-hand turn, there's 20 movements. There's 4 movements to the right, which is going to downtown Mystic, and at all cases, there were 0 movements, traffic movements, going from Virginia's Court across the street. What we're doing is providing a safer access or safer traffic management plan through the area here. This is one of the areas that we did apply for a grant, and we did get it from the state. It was one of their grants to reduce traffic accidents in local areas. So we're using state money to do the construction. We have a 10% match, which is already funded by the council and the RTM. What was done out there, a letter was sent out to the abutting property owners telling them that we will be doing some survey work out there, common courtesy in that area, and that because this is a federal project, there will be a public information meeting that must be held. And we're looking, I do believe the letter says sometime in the month of June,
that we have out there. But once the design has been completed and the public information meeting been held, then this will go to the state for their review, and then if it is, and then it will go to construction. So following through with the plan that we had in 2006, traffic management plan, traffic management study, excuse me, in an area, and then following through with a project that's been previously authorized by the town council and RTM.
Councilor Morton.
Yes. Gary, what exactly precipitated, I mean, was there a lot of accidents? I mean, what precipitated looking at this to begin with?
Yeah, I may be in a better, I mean, this has been an area that the traffic authority has looked at on again, off again. There was a fatality out here a number of years ago. I mean, all you have to, is my opinion, all you have to do is drive through it and see that it's like a roller derby out there in terms of, you know, the traffic movements, none of the driveways line up. It was purely a safety item, and it was an item also that got looked at with the previous school plan when the proposal was to build a middle school at the Plodchester site and trying to improve traffic, and so it's, you know, it's been out there for quite a few years in terms of, geez, what could we do here to improve traffic flow, to try to minimize the delay in the morning and the afternoon. It's a narrow road. Been here long enough to remember the Route 117 and Route 1 intersection where it didn't even have a left-hand turning lane. And that's when North Road was open. You used to be able to go around. So I don't know that there was one item. I think it was probably something that got looked at. This whole stretch probably got looked at. We have had numerous discussions with state DOT over the years on improvements to this area. Or what could we do, what could they do, what could we do to make some improvements. It probably actually went back to maybe when the park was built. And another traffic light got plopped in on Route 1, and how does that impact, you know, and I think there was also, Gary, correct me, I think at one point the traffic light at Harry Day Drive was just a blinking light. Correct. At one point, and then that got upgraded, and so I think it's a number. I don't think it was one particular event, though the fatality, I think, did catch everybody's attention that, Jesus, there's something more that we should be doing out here. And as Gary made reference to, I mean, even where the crosswalk is now, it probably isn't in the best location. So that would get addressed.
Councilor Barbara?
Do we know what this is going to do for the traffic on the other entrance into the neighborhood? I forget the name of the street.
There would be two other access points, which is Central Avenue and Fitch, and the traffic study did take a look at that, because what you didn't want to do is overload those areas, and because of the turning movements, only 30, and what I quoted before, 30 to the left, 4 to the right, that could be easily handled by those other two locations, and it really is safer going out onto Route 1, because from both of those, it's a traffic signal. If you go up down Depot Road, you go from Fitch, make a left right-hand turn, but you're at a traffic signal. So it is safer that way. And the state did take a look at, one of the reasons why we got the grant money is they did take a look at it's the local road accident reduction program. They looked at all the traffic accidents that were in that area, from fender benders to the fatality, and this met their threshold of providing money to do this improvement.
I'm thinking that the people that live right near this area must love this, because they're taking that road away, so you're not going to see the speeding cars.
It's just anecdotal, but my survey crew that was out there said the residents came out and they were supportive, but we didn't take a survey of everyone who showed up.
Yeah, when you're saying 30 cars an hour, or is that
total?
For an entire day, 30 cars out of there?
That was 11 years ago.
Yeah, there really isn't that There really isn't that much coming out of that one.
Really?
That seems way lower than I would have suspected, but I mean, that's probably, I mean, they put a counter on the ground, right?
They had someone physically, actually physically counting.
And was that like a weekend, or is that
It was just one day, Thursday. It was on a Thursday. So they picked the latter part of the week, but they were using standards at that time. You know, me and Mark drive by it all the time. We see a lot more people crossing the street, the walkers that go into the store, into the Bridge Market and that, versus a car darting across.
And I mean, I like the way this looks. What I would hope, and just like in the case of anything, like Dean just talked about the sign, you know, I mean, this could, if we could, this could get pinned up at Ackley's store. People could see this thing, and then have more of a input from, you know, so it doesn't seem like it's getting jammed down your throat. I mean, we have people who study things and they come up with better ways. I know by looking at this, every time I stop for a pedestrian, people behind me think I'm trying to take a left into the lot, and then someone comes like flying around me, and you have to, I've actually tilted that way because there was someone crossing this way and that person didn't see him because they didn't know, and they didn't know why I was stopping. I would like to add, just, I don't want to add a light, believe me, I don't want another light on Route 1, but there should be just some kind of blinking yellow when someone presses it. It just shows that, maybe a light that comes down and lights up the walk, because really, that is a tough spot, but that may eliminate what I'm talking about, because people do think you're turning in, and they come flying around you, and that's probably where the danger part is, but.
Oh, Mark, I'm sorry.
This is, I have never, Gary and I don't believe have ever talked about this, so Gary, have you, I mean, it's clear based on what you've handed out that this used to be a dead-end road at one point. Because the land is there for the cul-de-sac. Do you know when it was opened up, or what? We maybe could look at some old areas.
We'll take a look at some old mapping and that, but at least, none of us could trace back when that was opened up. We had looked at doing some improvements on the other side of the road, but now we're getting onto private property because the state's right-of-way is really right up to the edge there. Because there are a lot of driveway openings there that, if they were closed, it'd make it a little bit safer, going into the major one and then the one on, towards the gas station. But there is one in the middle too, and that's private property. And I know back when we were doing community development,
yep,
a program looking at the whole facade and that whole front. And that
correct. We looked at, I think that got referenced when Ms. Good was here. We had come up with a plan to try to clean up the frontage of this shopping center, and then also the other shopping center, the old Cumberland Farms Center, on the other side of Depot Road, and unfortunately we weren't able to get anywhere with the property owners at the time. I think this was owned by the Bartnick family at the time, and Mr. Rispoli owned the other property.
Well, what I can do is, once this is a little bit more finalized than this, we can post it, see if the Bridge Market will post it, see if any of the other businesses there, and then we'll make sure that we post it there as when the public information meeting will be. And it'll probably be held in some place, either at the library, I would think, because it's right in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So someplace around there so they don't have to come up here.
Yeah.
De La Cruz?
Yeah, no, I think with the presentation to the neighborhood, they may see the value in it, but it's when they don't know, and they say they're just gonna do this, and that hurts feelings. But has the business owner seen this at all? Or does he must know, he must be part of this somehow, right? Or does he?
Which business?
The Ackley's, the strip mall.
Not at this point, no.
They haven't seen that at all?
Not that, well, certainly.
This is in the beginning.
Ms. Good is aware of it, and it was, I did confirm, it was talked about at a couple of NRC meetings quite a while ago. But I think getting the sketch up on, at the stores would be helpful.
And this,
as Gary said, this is a very public process.
It is.
Because of the federal dollars.
Right.
And this was drawn just recently, or this is old?
We've had concept plans for.
We had concept plans, but the ink is almost dry on this. It was yesterday that this was. Markers. Yeah, so we color markers, so we aired them out before
we actually, there had been a plan a number of years ago to basically make these improvements on a temporary basis to try it out. And I think at the time we had met with Todd Page and so forth to get his input and adjustment of some Jersey barriers and so forth. So, I mean, as I said, and as Gary's noted, the concept's been around for a long time. I many, many years.
Councilor Deepest?
Yeah, obviously this is had to have been a dead end because of the way the houses are oriented. Remind me, I don't have my book in front of me, and it's all sort of a bad dream now. This is on the CIP list. This was down for $260,000.
For the construction portion, that's the state portion of the grant.
Right. And we voted for that? There were our own dollars going into that, right? Some of our own dollars?
Previously, there's a previous appropriations would be used for the 10% grant.
And did we say yes to that one?
Yes.
Yes. Well, initially, if I remember, this was purely a local project, and the
Yes.
council approved it. There was probably a solicitation by the COG, Council of Governments, for projects, safety projects, and we came to the council, got your authorization to submit the grant, submitted the grant, lo and behold, we got authorization and the funding. There is a match, Gary,
10% match.
10%. So whatever we don't use out of that initial allocation will come back to the capital reserve account.
Because if there's any money of ours involved, I cannot imagine we would have said yes. Since, for me anyway, it's not a top priority project. I put it as project, so apparently we did.
Council authorized 100% funding of this at one point.
Well, at one point. I'm just saying, in the recent season, because
Gary, when was that?
FYE 14.
In 14, the council approved $100 and something thousand. I forget the dollar amount, but I think it was over $100,000 of local money to do this project.
My predecessors. But this past budget cycle, when it was there in our book, when it said 260, what was the funding? Because again, I used to have.
And the funding was other, local road accident reduction program.
Okay,
State, federal money.
so if it looked like we weren't going to have to put in the bottom line was we voted yes on the thing, right? With a matching?
Twice.
Twice. It just seems, well, I'm not counting 2014. I'm counting this past budget season when we didn't seem to be in the mood to spend much of anything on the CIP list.
Well, Gary, it was last year that you approved it.
No, I'm being lazy now because I could probably go back and look at the stack of papers to figure out how we voted on this particular item. It's my impression that we would have said, nah, this is not top priority, we're not gonna spend any money on it. But, okay. It's still not a top priority for me, honestly, but, thank you. Yeah, it's a great idea to post these things up. They're colorful, people see them. Make sure Alan keeps them up though.
I think that's a great idea. Hanging it up down
Great
there.
idea, Jim.
Great idea. It's my best idea tonight.
I wouldn't go that far.
No? Oh, you like
I
my
would.
sign, you like my sign thing?
So are we informed?
We are informed.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Gary. It is 10 o'clock exactly. We have, I think, what are, I know the grant, appointment to knowing task force, those three we probably could tackle pretty easily.
Yep.
Maybe we stop there?
Well, I'm assuming John, unless he bought his ditty bag and is gonna stay overnight in the annex, is probably here for the POCD. You do have copies of the POCD, and you're probably just here to let him know.
Go. I give you 15 seconds to get up here. You got 1 minute.
We're only gonna go to chapter 6 tonight. And that's it.
Basically, all I wanted to tell you, again, thank you. We've wrapped up the POCD. The public hearing before the Planning Commission is June 29th. By state law, you have the option of holding a public hearing or not, and you shall make a determination either accepting the POCD or not accepting it. But if you accept it or don't accept it, the Planning Commission can still adopt it. So if you want to have a public hearing, if you want to have planning staff come before the council, explain the big changes and direction where we're going with the POCD, we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Councilor Deepest, can you move the historic documents preservation grant?
Certainly. As soon as I get to the,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I gotta get past all that exit 89 and that stuff.
Oh, my
You're
God,
beyond that now.
really?
It's over.
It ain't over till it's over. I'm gonna chain myself to a sign on 95.
Attachment 12.
I'll have my camera ready.
This smile brought to you by, you know. All right. Resolution authorizing the town manager to execute and deliver a contract for a historic documents preservation grant. That's the one?
Yep.
Okay. Whereas the town of Groton will benefit by the continuance of the historic document preservation program, which will be enabled and enhanced by grant funding. Now therefore be it resolved that Mark R. Offinger, town manager of the town of Groton, is empowered to execute and deliver in the name and on behalf of this municipality a contract with the Connecticut State Library for a historic documents preservation grant. I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and it appears that there's no matching. Is that right, Mark?
There's no match.
No matching.
Correct. Yep.
Great. Any discussion on this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 6-0 to 0. Counselor Morton? The Port Security Grant? And that's attachment 13. And you can basically just, at the bottom, just move, you know, their alternatives are accept the grant, fund the activity ourselves, or do nothing.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion that we accept the port security grant. Anticipated grant total is $25,000 with no required town match.
Second.
We have a motion by Counselor Morton, a second by Counselor Barber. Any discussion on this?
I just want to say I'm not a big fan of that vote, but I'm voting for it because we're getting the 25,000 from other sources. I wasn't sure we needed it, but this is money coming to the town, so.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 6-0 to 0. And the last was an appointment to Knowing School Public Gardens Task Force. And this is on there to nominate or put forth Heather Bond.
Summers.
I'm getting it. To fill a position on the Garden Task Force. So I will move her
Second.
as an appointment. We have a second. Any discussion on this?
Nope.
Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 6-0 to 0. The last thing was disposition of former Colonel Ledyard School. We could probably put that on the next.
Yeah, this is just simply, if any of you want to see any of these, but I wasn't going to put it on a future agenda. I've
Okay.
asked 4 or 5 times and nobody has said they want to go to Colonel Ledyard, William Seeley, Fitch Middle, and I just happened on this one to throw on the Knowing Community Garden. That was,
Yep.
it's the only reason it's there. If any of you either collectively or individually want to see a tour of any of these places, let me know.
The only reason I don't need a tour is because I see sell that one. So I don't need to personally see that one.
I think we're pretty good there. 6 nights of us are good.
6 nights.
6 nights.
Or 2/3.
But we do need to make a decision on what to do with it.
Yep.
We do, I say
And
so.
what to do with what?
Colonel Ledyard School.
Accept it back from the city.
I'm not really sure it's been offered to you. I think that was simply thrown out as a consideration. I think before you make a decision, you may want to take a look at it.
Okay.
But I don't know.
I took that as offered.
Mayor hasn't mentioned anything to me about it recently when I see her. I think that maybe is, I don't know what.
Okay.
But I think you'd all be better off to see it before you make a decision on what you can do with it.
Well, why don't we just schedule a field trip there then? Right?
Yeah, I'm open any day.
I'll bring a 4x4 poster on the ground. Just in case we want to screw a sign on it. Just saying.
Apparently people are pretty punchy. So.
If you would identify a date and time that would be good for you, that would be great. That was the intent of putting it on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I guess speaking, I mean, early in the morning or later in the afternoon is always good for me. So if we can get in there at, 7:30 in the morning, I'm all for it. I know that's not good for some, so.
I'd rather do early, too.
So.
You're talking about a weekend?
No, I'm talking about like a Wednesday or Thursday or.
Oh.
Dean will be late. He can't get out of his driveway on Allen Street.
My daughter's getting on a bus that travels on Allen Street.
Do it before Memorial Day. I could do it in the morning.
I can do
I'm right
it
down the
any-
street from it, so. I
Any
could s-
morning.
And can you do it any morning, or like maybe on a day off morning, or is
It
it?
would have to be a Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay.
I'll just look at the windows.
So,
I'm right down the street.
okay, we'll throw out a couple of dates for that. Don't forget that next Tuesday, we're in at 6 o'clock, and we're meeting with the Charter Revision Commission.
Yay.
Okay?
Yes.
This is the 17th.
Any other business?
We just have to make sure that.
Mark, can we make sure that Bonnie gets a copy of the,
She has everything.
she does have it? Okay.
Oh, all right.
We can just put it in a drawer, right?
Yeah.
Give it nice and neat.
Well, I was making sure Debbie got it,
Yeah.
but I didn't see that.
All right, does someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Move adjourned.
Adjourn.